Hey guys, tonight we slip into an Egyptian marketplace long before the rest of the city even remembers it exists. You're moving through the blue-grey quiet of pre-dawn, where everything feels half asleep except the stray cat giving you that pay your taxes stare. Clay roofs fade into silhouettes, and every footstep you take lands on dust that still holds a whisper of yesterday's heat. The marketplace, when you reach it, looks nothing like the loud, elbow-heavy chaos it will become. Right now it's a soft maze of empty stalls, overturned baskets, and one lonely donkey already regretting its entire career path. You can almost feel the day stretching ahead of you like a challenge, one you probably won't survive without at least 3 deep breaths and maybe a deity's favour. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you want, tell me your location and your local time down in the comments. I love seeing where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the dim, open square, adjusting the basket slung under your arm, careful not to trip on the uneven stones that seem custom designed by ancient engineers to ruin your ankles. The scent of the air is cool, holding that light Nile moisture before the sun begins its daily job of baking you into a human flatbread. A few early figures appear around you, another vendor dragging a crate, an old man sweeping dust that will be replaced in exactly 10 minutes, a baker carrying dough so aggressively puffy it looks alive. The calm is strange, almost suspicious. You know what this marketplace becomes by mid-morning, a full orchestra of haggling, yelling, laughing, children sprinting, and goats plotting things goats shouldn't plot. But right now, the silence wraps around everything, soft and cotton-like, as though the city hasn't decided what role it wants to play yet. As you move deeper between rows of wooden posts and woven mat roofs, you feel yourself slipping into the morning routine shared by thousands of Egyptians across centuries. Historical records, yes, even the boring ones on broken pottery shards, show that marketplaces opened painfully early, partially because daylight was life, and partially because the pharaoh had no intention of supplying public lanterns. And honestly, the earlier you start, the better chance you have of selling your best items before the sun turns your stall into a convection oven. You pause near your spot, that familiar rectangle claimed by habit, and a few well-placed threats to competing sellers. Under your feet is the patch of dust that will become your workplace for the next 14 hours. It looks innocent now. It won't later. Behind you, a distant cough echoes off the walls, one of the meat sellers warming up his lungs as if preparing for an Olympic shouting event. Somewhere else, a potter taps at a jar, maybe checking for cracks or maybe just bored. You hear a rooster crow, then another crow back in a competitive tone, and suddenly you're aware of how alive the place is even before it fully wakes. You step toward your stall, but your toe nudges a tiny clay bead. You pick it up. Just a simple green faience bead, but still pretty. People dropped things constantly in the market, especially items like beads and amulets, and archaeologists have found tons of them buried in layers of marketplace debris. That's your mainstream historical fact for the section, and you're welcome. You tuck the bead into your pocket, planning to return it later, or maybe use it as a lucky charm. After all, superstition is practically the unofficial currency of this entire place, and here comes your quirky tidbit. Some vendors sprinkled little lines of crushed natron around their stalls in the belief it would keep jealous spirits, or jealous competitors, from interfering with their profits. Whether that worked, historians still argue whether it was effective magic or just an ancient form of placebo retail therapy. The sky brightens a little, soft peach hues sliding across the rooftops, and you begin clearing your space. You straighten the mat, adjust the low table, and mentally chant your usual morning phrase. Please let today be slightly less chaotic than yesterday. It will not be. A breeze drifts through the square, carrying the earthy smell of clay ovens just beginning to glow. You spot a woman balancing a basket of figs on her head, walking with that incredibly judgmental grace people had back then, like she knows she could carry 3 more baskets and still walk better than you. She gives you a nod, and you nod back, pretending you didn't almost drop your own basket earlier. The quiet gradually thins as more sellers arrive. You hear faint murmurs, half greetings, half complaints about back pain. Marketplace workers, through all periods of Egyptian history, were famously dramatic. Not malicious, just dramatic. Like if someone stubbed their toe, 10 seconds later, 3 people would insist they now needed an amulet, a blessing, and possibly a fresh will. You can't help glancing toward the eastern horizon. The sun is creeping up, the gold edge of it peeking like a nosy neighbour. Once it fully rises, everything changes. The temperature, the pace, the noise, and your mood. For now, though, the moment hangs in a warm, suspended stillness. You savour it. It won't last even 5 more minutes. Then, from across the square, a shout, "Who moved my basket?" The day has officially begun. You take a slow breath, letting the cool air fill your lungs. You feel the weight of the basket on your hip, the dust beneath your sandals, the buzz of anticipation building around the growing crowd. You're here. You're part of this daily rhythm, this beating, bustling, maddening heart of Egyptian life. And even though the sun is rising and the chaos is approaching, there's comfort in knowing that for thousands of years, people just like you stood in this exact kind of space, waiting for the marketplace to come alive and swallow them whole. You crouch down beside your stall and start arranging your setup, moving with the kind of practiced muscle memory that only comes from doing the same thing every single day. You spread out your woven mat, tugging the corners so it sits flat, even though you already know some wandering donkey is going to step directly on it within the hour. The sky is sliding from soft purple into pale gold now, and you can feel the faint touch of warmth brushing your forearms as the sun climbs. You glance around, noticing other vendors doing the exact same ritual, some gracefully, some looking like they just lost a wrestling match with their own crates. You reach into your basket and take out your goods one by one, placing them in tidy rows. Clay jars, small bundles of herbs, a few wrapped items you hope to upsell, and a handful of trinkets that look far more exotic than they actually are. You give one jar a quick wipe with your sleeve. Dust attaches itself to everything here like it has abandonment issues. As you rearrange the items into neat little clusters, you can't help making mental bargains with the universe. If I sell just 3 jars today, maybe I'll reward myself with a honey cake. This internal negotiation is a cornerstone of ancient marketplace motivation, though historians still argue whether anyone ever actually kept their promises of self-reward. A competitor strolls by and grunts a greeting. He eyes your setup with a glance so fast you almost miss the judgment baked into it. That's the thing about stalls here. Your layout is silent marketing. If your jars look crooked or your goods feel cluttered, customers notice. Egyptians were surprisingly aesthetic shoppers. They wanted sleek lines, nice colours, and a stall that didn't look like it had just survived a sandstorm. Though to be fair, everything here has literally survived a sandstorm. You shift a few baskets round, making sure your best items sit at the front. A little psychological trick. You put the big items eye level, hoping to catch attention. Ancient Egyptian vendors didn't use SEO, but stall placement was basically the analog version. And they knew their buyer behaviour well enough to work the angles long before modern marketing existed. A woman at the stall next to you starts slapping her basket repeatedly, muttering about a scorpion she saw earlier. She hasn't actually seen the scorpion again, but she's decided it's probably plotting a comeback. You sympathise. Marketplace life is full of tiny critters that show up without invitation. Scorpions, lizards, beetles with questionable intentions. There's a fringe theory among enthusiasts that some vendors kept small cats not just for mice, but for dramatic flair, because nothing draws customers like a cat lounging on your merchandise pretending it owns the kingdom. As you line up your jars, you tap each lid lightly. This isn't superstition. It's practical, checking for cracks and making sure none of them loosened overnight. Cracked pottery sells about as well as warm beer, which is ironic considering warm beer was served everywhere. You remember the potter who lives 3 streets over, always telling customers that a small crack simply means the pot has emotional depth. You tried that line once. It did not work. By now the sun is fully above the horizon, stretching long golden rays across the marketplace. You feel them warming your shoulders as you crouch, arranging the last row of goods. The air still feels light, breathable, pleasant. Something you'll miss dearly by noon. Other vendors begin drifting in, greeting each other with sleepy nods or loud gossip about someone's cousin's neighbour's goat that caused some scandal. You hear snippets. Someone fell off a boat, someone else overcharged a temple worker, and apparently one man claims he saw a god in his dreams telling him to raise all his prices. You make a note not to ask which god, because that debate can last all day. The noise rises little by little. Baskets thump down. Wooden crates scrape across the ground. Someone knocks over a clay pot, curses softly, then pretends they totally meant for that to happen. You feel yourself settling more deeply into the rhythm, this strange dusty ballet of setup and preparation. It's like watching a city wake up in slow motion. A teenage boy rushes past carrying far more fish than any one human should reasonably carry. He smells like he lost an argument with the Nile. He gives you an apologetic nod as he nearly steps on your jars. You smile politely, the universal vendor expression for please walk away before something breaks. Then comes your quirky tidbit of the section. Some sellers hung tiny painted eyes on their stalls, believing they would watch customers and discourage theft. The logic was basically, if the gods are too busy, maybe a painted eyeball will guilt them into honesty. Ancient psychology at its finest. Historians still argue whether shoppers were genuinely influenced by these decorative eyes, or simply confused by them. You take a moment to stretch your back. Standing, bending, lifting and twisting, your entire job is basically a full-body workout disguised as small business ownership. A few vendors groan dramatically with each movement, making it sound like they're reenacting the creation of the universe. You roll your shoulders and try not to join their chorus. The marketplace is nearly ready now. The rows of stalls are forming clean pathways, though they'll turn into tangled traffic jams soon enough. You glance up and notice a flock of ibis gliding overhead, their wings cutting neat shapes across the dawn sky. One drops something, suspiciously close to a basket of onions. You pretend not to see it. Birds have no respect for commerce. Finally, you place your last item, a small carved trinket, at the front of your stall. You give it a final adjustment, perfectly centered. There, your stall is ready, neat, tidy, and fully prepared for the incoming storm of customers, bargains, arguments, and comedic disasters. You take a deep breath, letting the warm air fill your chest. The marketplace around you is waking, stirring, buzzing, stretching its limbs, and you feel that familiar mix of anticipation and dread. Another long day is about to begin. You're ready, mostly. You've barely finished adjusting the last jar when you hear the first unmistakable sound of the morning. Hurried footsteps, the soft slap-slap of sandals against dusty stone, and the dramatic inhale of a customer preparing to bargain before breakfast. The early bird shoppers are here. You straighten your posture just a little, because even though you're not a morning person, and frankly, neither is the civilization around you, you need to look alert enough to convince these people you haven't just rolled out of bed 20 minutes ago. Your first customer of the day approaches with the energy of someone who has already fought 3 battles before dawn. She's an older woman with a scarf wrapped tightly around her head to guard against the wind. Her gaze scans your goods with the laser precision of someone who knows the exact price these items should be, down to the grain of sand, and who fully intends to test your honesty, your patience, and your will to live. She picks up a jar, frowns, taps it, brings it close to her ear for reasons unknown to science. Too light, she declares. This one's emptier than my son's promises. You offer a polite smile, the one you keep handy for customers who arrive ready for war. The lid is sealed, you say. Perfect weight for storage. She narrows her eyes as though you've personally offended her ancestors. And then the negotiation begins. Early customers in Egyptian markets were infamous for opening their wallets as tightly as possible. There's a mainstream historical fact for you. Ancient papyri mention that the best shoppers were the morning ones because they were efficient, quick-thinking, and deeply suspicious of every price tag. And by price tag, of course, you mean verbal numbers barked loudly until someone gave up. Your customer leans closer. I'll give you half. You laugh softly, partly to diffuse tension, and partly because her offer is so low it could trip over a beetle. Half? You repeat. If I sold it for half, I'd starve before midday. She counters with a quarter of a smile, one that suggests she respects your attempt to push back but still believes she can out-haggle you into oblivion. While she thinks, another early customer appears, a man carrying a bundle of reeds. He walks straight up to your herbs, picks one up, sniffs it with exaggerated flourish, and immediately says, not good, not bad, just, You want to ask what that means, but decide it's safer not to interrupt the sacred ritual of contemplative sniffing. He gives you a side eye and says, You watered these yesterday, didn't you? He's right, but you're not about to reveal trade secrets. Moist herbs look fresher, and that's the entire point. Freshness is a gift of the Nile, you answer cryptically, which earns you a raised eyebrow. The man nods slowly like he approves of your poetic nonsense. Meanwhile, the older woman has made her dramatic decision. She slams the jar down, not hard enough to crack it, but just firmly enough to remind you she could. Fine, she says, but throw in a sprig of mint. You do, of course, because mint grows like it's trying to take over Egypt. She walks away muttering triumphantly, clutching her jar as if she's won a national championship. You watch her go with a mix of relief and mild exhaustion. First customer bargaining is like an endurance test with emotional taxes included. But here's your quirky tidbit. Some vendors believed that the first sale of the day set the tone for the market's entire outcome. If it was a good sale, spirits were said to bless your stall with luck. If it was a bad one, well, some people closed their stalls and reopened them sideways to reset the spirit. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or simply a convenient excuse to escape annoying customers. The reed-carrying man steps forward next. He's quieter, more thoughtful, and definitely less dramatic. But he's a sniffer, one of those buyers who believes they can detect the entire story of a plant's life by inhaling deeply. You hold your breath as he performs yet another prolonged sniff. "This is good," he finally says. "Where did you get it?" You gesture vaguely toward the horizon, not lying, not fully answering, just maintaining the sacred vendor art of never revealing your supplier unless bribed with baked goods. He buys 2 bundles with polite haggling, which is the negotiation equivalent of a warm breeze. After he leaves, you feel the tiniest spark of confidence. 2 sales already. Not bad for a morning still shaking off the chill, but there's no time to relax because the next wave arrives. The loud ones. A trio of young men approach, talking over each other, laughing, pointing, accidentally bumping into your table, and apologizing with zero sincerity. You watch them swirl around like small sandstorms. They touch everything. They pick up jars they have no intention of buying. One sniffs your herbs the wrong way and sneezes directly into the wind. The Nile gods are judging him. They're harmless mostly, but loud customers always attract more customers. People drawn in by the noise, assuming something exciting is happening. This is an accidental marketing tactic that ancient sellers relied on constantly. Noise equals interest, interest equals sales, sales equal food, and food equals surviving another day without collapsing into a sarcophagus of exhaustion. While the trio debates the jar colours with the seriousness of judges deciding the fate of Egypt, you notice another early shopper, a temple worker, judging by the linen sash at his waist. He studies your goods in a quiet, almost reverent manner. These types were steady buyers, reliable, calm. They didn't bargain too hard and they always paid in full copper weights, not those terribly uneven stone tokens some farmers tried to pass off as official currency. He buys 3 jars and moves on with a nod that feels like a blessing. You swear the sun gets a little brighter after that sale, or maybe that's just your mood adjusting to the promise of breakfast money. As more early customers trickle in, you fall into the steady pulse of the marketplace, smiling, answering questions, telling tiny white lies. Yes, that jar is sturdier than the others, and mentally preparing for the midday chaos to come. But for now, in this early hour, you find your rhythm. You bargain, you nod, you sigh theatrically when someone lowballs you so hard you nearly ascend. And through it all, you feel the marketplace slowly warming, stretching, and waking with its familiar blend of noise, tension, hope, and humour. The first customers have arrived. The day is truly underway. You drift from your stall for a moment, just a few steps, nothing suspicious, into the part of the marketplace that wakes up faster than anything else, the spice seller's row. Even from a distance, your nose knows exactly where you're headed. The air becomes thicker, heavier, swirling with layers of scent stacked like a fragrant pyramid. Cumin, cinnamon, coriander, fenugreek, and something so sharp it makes your eyes water before you even identify it. You didn't plan on walking through this lane, but the spices have a gravitational pull strong enough to drag in half the city. You pass under a reed canopy that does absolutely nothing to protect you from the smell of freshly ground garlic. One vendor is pounding something in a stone mortar with enough enthusiasm to shake the dust off nearby stalls. As he crushes it, the aroma shoots straight into your sinuses like a divine intervention you did not request. He gives you a cheerful wave, too cheerful for this hour, and you suspect he's been awake since last night. Some spice sellers start grinding their blends long before dawn because the fragrance draws in morning customers like honey draws flies. Mainstream historical fact right there. Egyptian markets relied heavily on scent to grab attention, especially for spices and perfumes, which acted as both advertisement and air freshener. To your left, a woman crouches behind a low table displaying neat piles of turmeric, red pepper, and crushed rose petals. She's arranged everything so perfectly you feel a little embarrassed about the way your stall always looks like a mild breeze could reorganize it. She nods to you, then leans forward and sprinkles a little pinch of saffron between her fingers, letting the sunlight catch it like gold dust. It's mesmerizing. It's also probably the most expensive thing in this entire market. You absolutely do not touch it. As you move deeper along the row, conversations float past. Spice sellers love talking about recipes, about gossip, about who's adding sand to their pepper to cheat customers. A controversial move that historians still argue whether was truly widespread or just exaggerated in old texts. One vendor loudly accuses another of borrowing his mortar last week and never returning it. The accused vendor responds by dramatically placing his hand on his chest and gasping as if he's being framed for treason. You keep walking before you get pulled into this performance. A young boy rushes by, carrying a tray of spices balanced precariously above his head. The tray tilts dangerously, and for one heroic moment he manages to rebalance it, only to stumble again as a goat appears out of nowhere like an agent of chaos. The tray wobbles, he yelps, and you instinctively reach out, but miraculously nothing spills. The goat trots away smugly. The boy shoots you a grateful look before sprinting off again. That's the Spice District for you. 1 part business, 1 part disaster sitcom. Someone behind you is roasting coriander seeds in a pan. The warmth radiates outward, and the aroma wraps around you like a blanket. The crackling sound is oddly comforting, a little ASMR moment delivered courtesy of ancient culinary tradition. Egyptians adored spices not just for food, but for medicine, rituals, embalming, and even cosmetics. There's your fact quota making itself useful. Across from the roasting vendor, a man with a magnificent moustache, truly a moustache that deserves its own monument, starts shouting out prices in a cadence that sounds suspiciously like a song. His voice rings through the row, drawing customers like moths. He drums his fingers on jars, on baskets, on anything that makes a percussive sound. Rhythm is marketing, apparently. A quirky tidbit for you. Some sellers believed rhythmic chanting attracted good spirits that sweetened their merchandise. Historians still argue whether this was an intentional spiritual practice or just bored vendors turning their sales pitch into a musical. You pause by his stall for a moment as he scoops up a handful of cumin, lets it fall slowly back into the basket and says to the crowd, "See? Perfect dryness, no clumps, no lies, no curses." And somehow, that last part sounds very pointed, like he's looking directly at a rival 2 stalls down. You continue walking, letting the changing aromas guide your sense of direction. A cool breeze sweeps through the lane, briefly clearing the air before another wave of cinnamon and garlic rushes back in. Spices move like weather patterns here. You breathe deeply, well, as deeply as you can without coughing, and appreciate the sensory overload. The spice row feels alive, buzzing, almost electric. You can practically taste the day building around you. Then something unexpected happens. A heavy waft of myrrh drifts from behind a curtain. Myrrh has that unmistakable resinous scent. Dark, sweet, earthy. It's the kind of smell that feels ancient even when it's fresh. You peek over and see a merchant carefully scraping myrrh resin from a cloth-lined bowl. He's separating impurities with the precision of a surgeon. Myrrh was precious enough that messing up its preparation could ruin someone's entire day, or week. Temple workers, embalmers, and perfumers paid good money for the pure stuff. He glances up. "Careful," he says softly. "Smelling too much of this makes you dream strange things." You smile, unsure if he's joking. With spice sellers, the line between science and superstition is a thin, flexible string. As you turn away, you brush past a stall selling mixed spice blends stored in clay jars decorated with tiny hand-painted symbols. One jar has a crocodile on it. You pick it up, confused. The vendor grins. "Protection," he explains. "For the stomach." You laugh. "Does it work?" He shrugs. "Historians will argue about it someday." You put the jar down before you accidentally spend money you do not have. Another vendor calls out to you, waving a handful of dried chili pods. "Try one?" he asks. You politely decline. Last time you tried one, you spent 15 minutes believing your tongue had spiritually detached from your body. Instead, you continue meandering through the row, letting the sounds blend together. The clatter of jars, the rhythmic grinding, the hushed bargaining, the occasional sneeze that echoes like divine punishment. You brush past clouds of spice powder shimmering in the sunlight, each breath carrying hints of distant lands. Spices came from far away, Nubia, Punt, the Levant, and the marketplace was one of the rare places where you could experience the world without leaving your city. Eventually you circle back to your own stall, carrying with you the lingering perfume of the spice row. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin, a sensory souvenir of the chaotic, colourful heart of the market. You inhale slowly, letting the last whiff of cinnamon drift away, and just in time too. Because as you settle back in, the temperature begins to rise, the noise begins to swell, and the marketplace prepares to shift into its next state of being. The sun decides it has waited long enough. One moment the light is soft and golden, and the next it's a full-blown interrogation lamp shining directly into your life choices. Egyptian heat doesn't arrive. It descends like some dramatic deity throwing off its cloak and saying, "All right, mortals, let's get this over with." You feel it first on the tops of your shoulders, then creeping down your spine, then settling into your sandals until your toes start questioning every decision that led you here. The marketplace reacts instantly. Shade becomes currency. Sellers tug their woven mats higher, adjust awnings, shift their entire stalls 3 centimeters to the left in search of a single sliver of shadow. You watch one man tilt his entire table at a precarious angle just to keep his jars out of direct sunlight. He looks incredibly proud of himself, as though he's engineered a groundbreaking innovation in ancient cooling systems. That's the thing about the heat. It turns everyone mildly unhinged before lunch. You lift the edge of your awning, just a thin sheet of woven reeds, and pray it stays put. The sunlight bleeding through casts patterns of warm, flickering gold across your jars. Pretty, but misleading. This is the type of heat that warms clay to the point of personal betrayal. One jar is already getting hotter than you'd like. You nudge it back into the shade as though coaxing a misbehaving toddler. The air shifts again, growing heavier, thicker, almost syrup-like. You can practically see the heat shimmering across the ground. It rolls between the stalls like a giant invisible wave, melting what little morning coolness was left. A donkey trudges past you, head low, ears drooping as if it too is questioning its career path. Even the marketplace dogs, normally full of chaotic energy, slink into scraps of shade and collapse dramatically, as if auditioning for a tragedy play. You reach for your water jug, take a long sip, and immediately remember that water stored in the sun tastes like warm disappointment. A seller 2 stalls down begins fanning himself with a palm leaf. His movements are slow, desperate, and absolutely ineffective. You try not to laugh, because honestly, you'll be doing the same in 10 minutes. The heat shifts the marketplace's mood too. People move slower, bargain slower, glare faster. A mainstream historical fact: midday in Egyptian markets was not prime shopping time. Most people ran errands early in the morning or late in the afternoon. Midday was basically survival mode. Workers either endured the heat because they had no choice, or they took short breaks huddled under awnings, sipping thin beer that somehow tasted better the hotter it got. A group of women pass by carrying water jars on their heads. They make it look effortless, walking with the balance of trained acrobats. One of them meets your eye and smirks, probably because she can tell you're seconds away from melting into a small human puddle. You stretch your neck, adjusting your linen collar. Linen helps, but not enough. Egyptians mastered the art of dressing for heat. Light fabric, loose fit, breathable layers. But even the best outfit in history can't defeat a sun that wants to personally roast you. The heat also triggers one of the marketplace's stranger rituals, the Great Shade Shuffle. Every 10 or 15 minutes, vendors subtly shift their stalls a few centimeters to chase the ever-moving shadow lines. It's like watching a slow, silent, collective waltz. You join in, scooting your table a bit, sweeping your mat over just enough to follow the darkened patch on the ground. A goat sees you moving and assumes this is an invitation to invade your stall. You redirect it gently, because arguing with a goat never ends well. Then the spice seller from earlier calls out, "Hot today," as if the sun isn't physically trying to cook you alive. You lift your hand in a half-hearted wave, trying to conserve the energy you'll need to remain conscious. A quirky tidbit to cool your mind while your body overheats. Some Egyptians wore cones of scented wax on their heads during festivals, which melted slowly throughout the night. Scholars still debate whether these cones were everyday cooling devices, ceremonial accessories, or simply a bad idea in any climate involving direct sunlight. Historians still argue whether anyone ever dared to wear one in a midday marketplace without immediately regretting life. Someone passes by carrying a basket of bread, and the warm, yeasty smell mixes with the hot air, creating a strangely comforting aroma. It reminds you that lunchtime is approaching, and soon you'll get a small break. Maybe one piece of bread, maybe a handful of onions if luck is especially kind. You make a mental note to budget your energy until then. A scribe in crisp linen walks through the market with a purposeful stride, holding a wooden palette and stylus. The sunlight reflects off the wet ink on his tools. He looks entirely unbothered by the heat, which is deeply suspicious. Scribes always act like the world doesn't affect them, probably because they spend most of their lives inside cool temple buildings. You watch him pass and wonder whether he even sweats like normal humans. You glance over your goods again, checking which items are vulnerable. Some herbs wilt easily. Some jars explode from internal pressure if they get too hot. Rare, but possible. You've seen it happen once. A jar popped loudly, sending a nearby vendor shrieking so dramatically that onlookers thought a god had appeared. The only divine presence was the sudden realization that clay gets cranky when overheated. The heat keeps building. A shimmer ripples along the ground. You fan yourself with your hand, fully aware that this does absolutely nothing but provide moral support. A customer approaches, wipes sweat off her forehead, and asks the price of one of your jars. You tell her. She squints at you, clearly attempting to calculate the friendship discount she believes she deserves. She doesn't get one. Even the sun can't soften your business sense. As she walks away, you look out over the stalls. A dense grid of awnings, blankets, jars, baskets, ropes, shouting voices, sunbeams slicing through dust. The marketplace feels alive, breathing, stretching under the heat, and despite the sweat clinging to your skin, despite the dryness creeping into your throat, despite the overwhelming brightness, you're part of that pulse. You endure it. You move with it. You find small pockets of humor in it. Because if you don't, the heat wins, and you absolutely refuse to be defeated by the weather. You barely have a moment to wipe the sweat from your forehead when you hear it. The unmistakable clatter of hooves skidding across stone, followed by a bleating complaint that sounds like someone stepped on a trumpet. Animals have officially entered the chat. The marketplace may be a place for trade, but it's also basically the ancient equivalent of a petting zoo no one asked for, and everyone secretly fears. A donkey squeezes between two pottery stalls with the resigned expression of a creature who has accepted its fate centuries ago. Its owner trails behind, shouting half-hearted instructions that the donkey ignores with expert precision. You press yourself closer to your table as it trots by, its side brushing dangerously close to your jars. The wind from its passing wafts a scent you absolutely did not consent to inhale this early in the day. Somewhere a potter curses loudly because the donkey just bumped a stack of bowls he balanced like a Jenga tower for showmanship. Before you even recover, a goat appears, that goat. The one with the perpetual glare and the personality of a street thug. Its horns are small, but its confidence is enormous. It locks eyes with you the way rival wrestlers do before a match. You gently wave your hand. No, you whisper, not today. The goat tilts its head, weighs its options, and decides you're not worth the paperwork. It trots off, straight into your neighbour's stall. Your neighbour screams, and honestly, you feel seen. A quirky marketplace truth. Animals weren't just background characters, they were part of the economy. Goats supplied milk, donkeys hauled heavy loads, geese acted as surprisingly aggressive security alarms, and cats, well, they did whatever they wanted, and people just accepted it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Egyptians domesticated geese long before many other cultures, and they used them as guards because their honks could wake an entire district faster than a drum. which is ironic because the goose currently marching toward you looks like it wants to audition for a crime. It waddles forward with malicious intent. You brace yourself. "Go away," you whisper again. The goose spreads its wings dramatically, as if preparing to challenge you to single combat. Somewhere behind you a child giggles, because of course children love watching adults get bullied by birds. The goose lunges. You dodge, narrowly avoiding a beak-to-knee encounter. A jar almost tips, and you grab it with reflexes you didn't know you had. The goose squawks in frustration and, thank the gods, is distracted by a dropped piece of bread a few stalls away. It stomps off like someone insulted its entire lineage. Just as you're processing this avian attack, a vendor across the lane starts yelling at a cow. Yes, a cow. A magnificent creature that has wandered all the way from who knows where and is now inspecting a basket of cucumbers like it's considering a purchase. Its owner runs after it, red-faced and breathless, shouting, "No, not again," which honestly suggests this cow has a history of market-related mischief. "Why do we even allow animals here?" someone mutters. The answer, because it's impossible not to. Animals are everywhere. Transport animals, food animals, sacred animals, sneaky animals. A fringe tidbit for you. Some Egyptians believed certain goats could detect thieves, not because of magic, but because goats are naturally judgmental and scream at anything suspicious. Historians still argue whether this was ever an organised system, or just ancient people noticing goats behave like tiny alarm sirens. You lean forward to reposition your jars, making sure none sit on the edge, where a wandering hoof might transform them into tragically expensive pottery shards. You adjust your mat again, which is now slightly crooked thanks to the earlier donkey drive-by. You sigh deeply, feeling the heat, the noise, and the endless animal parade blending into one long test of your patience. Then comes the camel. You hear it before you see. It, the groaning, disinterested rumble of a creature that looks bored enough to write poetry about suffering. The camel lumbers through the centre of the marketplace like it owns the place, led by a merchant wearing layered desert robes. Everyone shifts aside. Even the goose respects camel traffic laws. The camel pauses next to a fruit stall and slowly, dramatically turns its head toward a basket of dates. "Don't you dare," the fruit seller whispers. The camel blinks. It dares. With the casual elegance of a being untouched by consequences, it grabs a mouthful of dates. The fruit seller screams. The camel chews like it's sampling fine cuisine. Onlookers laugh. You press your lips together to keep from giggling too loudly, because after the goose tried to assassinate you, you really don't want to upset the cosmic animal hierarchy. Finally, the camel's owner pulls it away, apologizing while also laughing, because nobody controls a camel, not even camel owners. The fruit seller starts calculating how many dates he just lost and whether he can charge the camel rent. The chaos quiets for a moment. A dog trots by, tail wagging happily, carrying half a fish it definitely stole from someone. A pair of chickens scatter across the walkway, chased by two children who seem to believe they're on a heroic mission. You adjust your awning again, smiling despite the madness. Because this is marketplace life. The animals bring noise, trouble, smells, and the occasional heart attack, sure, but they also bring movement, personality, and stories you'll retell for years. You settle back into your stall, finally catching your breath, and you realize something. The day is still young. More animals will come, more chaos will unfurl, and you, somehow, will keep surviving all of it. Just another morning in the Egyptian marketplace. You've barely recovered from the goose incident when you spot a trio of figures approaching, moving with that unmistakable, "We're here to ruin your day in a very official way" energy. Inspectors, and not just any inspectors. The tax scribe, the weights and measures guy, and the marketplace overseer whose eyebrows alone could shut down a business. You straighten your posture instinctively. Even your jars seem to sit up taller, as though preparing for judgment. The tax scribe arrives first. He holds a wooden pallet with two little ink lumps, black and red, glimmering like ominous dew. His reed pen sits tucked neatly behind his ear, poised like a dagger. He greets you not with a smile, but with that bureaucratic nod bureaucrats have used across all of human history. The kind that says, "I don't want to be here either, but we're doing this dance." He clears his throat. "Business today?" You consider answering with existential honesty. "I've been attacked by a goose and nearly trampled by a donkey, sir, so let's not get ahead of ourselves." But instead, you offer the standard reply. Steady! He grunts approvingly, or maybe disapprovingly. With scribes, it's impossible to tell, and scratches something onto his tablet. This is your mainstream historical fact. Tax scribes did routine rounds in marketplaces, recording transactions, checking sales, and making sure everyone paid their dues. And yes, they were feared. These people had the authority of the entire bureaucracy behind them. As he writes, the weights and measures inspector steps forward. This guy carries a bag of official stone weights that clack together ominously as he moves. Everyone in the marketplace knows that sound. It's like hearing the footsteps of doom. He places a weight on your table so forcefully you feel your soul vibrate. "Let's see," he says, in a tone that suggests he hopes, truly hopes, to catch someone cheating today. You're not, but that's beside the point. The man has the facial expression of someone who wakes up excited to disappoint others. You bring out your scale, a simple wooden beam with 2 little pans suspended by cords. It's not fancy, but it's trustworthy. You place your standard weight on one side and one of your jars on the other. The inspector squints at the pans like they're performing sorcery. Then he leans down, presses his face close, and examines the balance with dramatic intensity. "It seems correct," he says at last, sounding slightly disappointed. You exhale quietly. You didn't want to celebrate too loudly. The last thing you need is to be flagged for excessive joy during inspection procedures. Just when you think the ordeal is over, the overseer steps up. Ah, yes, the eyebrow man. His job is to determine whether your stall is properly arranged, appropriately clean, and not infringing on neighbouring space. His eyebrows rise as he scans your setup. You attempt to appear calm, though inside you feel like a student waiting to see if the teacher notices the homework you forgot to do. He gestures to your mat. "Is that crease new?" "It's, temporary," you say. He hums disapprovingly. Overseers love humming more than talking. Humming allows them to convey judgment without committing to anything legally binding. He moves to the jars, lifts one, taps it, sniffs it. "Why are people sniffing your goods so much today?" He gently shakes the jar, listening for something. You have no idea what he expects to hear. Ancient inspectors, it seems, were part detective, part priest, part disappointed uncle. Finally, with a sigh so heavy you can feel it in your bones, he lowers the jar and says, "Acceptable. Not great. Not excellent. But acceptable is the sacred middle ground that keeps you in business." As they prepare to leave, the jotting scribe suddenly pauses and looks at you suspiciously. "Have you adjusted your prices recently?" You choose your words carefully. "I adjust according to demand." This is technically true and also something everyone does. He narrows his eyes, makes one more note, and walks away with the others, leaving you free and slightly drained. You lean back behind your stall, letting out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. But the relief lasts only a second because a nearby vendor immediately starts whispering loudly, "What did they want?" Marketplace gossip spreads faster than desert fire. 2 seconds later, 3 others wander over, pretending to browse your goods while blatantly fishing for information. "Oh, nothing," you say casually. "Just routine checks." "Routine," one repeats, as if you've just announced the sky's falling. "They never check me this early," you shrug. "Maybe they like me." They laugh. The kind of laugh that means they absolutely do not like you. May the gods protect you. Someone claps your shoulder sympathetically before wandering off to complain about inspectors in general. And here comes your quirky tidbit of the day. In some regions, vendors believed inspectors carried charms that could detect dishonesty, like magical lie detectors. Were these charms real? Probably just decorative beads or amulets. But historians still argue whether inspectors encouraged the superstition on purpose, using mysterious jewellery to intimidate sellers into honesty. You glance over to watch the inspectors move through the next row. One potter, clearly unprepared, panics and starts rearranging his stall so frantically he knocks over his own display. A basket of tiny clay figurines spills across the ground. The inspector looks mildly amused. You silently send the potter your deepest sympathies. Then, because the marketplace has a sense of humour, the goose from earlier suddenly reappears, right in front of the inspector. It honks, loudly. The inspector steps back with a startled yelp, perhaps the first human sound he's made that isn't bureaucratic, monotone. The goose flares its wings triumphantly as if scoring a victory against government oversight. You bite your lip to keep from laughing. Once the officials move on, the marketplace breathes again. Conversations resume. Voices rise. Someone starts shouting prices theatrically again. The oppressive tension evaporates, replaced with the familiar rhythm of everyday survival. You shake out your arms, straighten your jars, and take a sip of your water, even though it now tastes like it's been sitting on a rooftop for 6 hours. Your pulse slows. Your shoulders relax. The inspectors are gone. Your stall survived. And for the moment at least, you feel untouchable. Peace returns for all of 8 seconds, just long enough for you to think, maybe the worst is over. And then you hear it. The low, buzzing murmur of voices blending, stacking, layering into the familiar tidal wave known as the Marketplace Gossip Network. If inspectors are the storm, gossip is the flood. You don't choose to enter it. It simply rises around you and sweeps you along like driftwood in the Nile. The first whisper comes from your left. Something about a fisherman's daughter running off with a potter's apprentice. The details are already inconsistent, which means the rumour is new and still evolving like a fast-growing vine. You try to ignore it, but gossip in the Egyptian marketplace moves with gravitational force. People lean closer, heads turn. Sellers pretend to adjust their wares while absolutely eavesdropping with full focus. A woman selling onions leans toward you. "Did you hear?" she asks, eyes wide, tone dramatic. You shake your head, even though you have in fact heard exactly 3 versions of the story already. "Well," she whispers, "they say the potter is furious. Threw clay everywhere this morning." "Is that why he knocked over his own figurines?" you ask. "No," she says, as if disappointed in your lack of imagination. "He did that because the inspectors came early." You nod solemnly. Marketplace logic dictates that all chaos is connected, even when it absolutely isn't. From your right, another vendor leans in. "Did you hear? A merchant from the north arrived last night, carrying cedar boxes filled with amulets blessed by desert monks." You raise an eyebrow. Desert monks are famous for silence, not mass-producing amulets. You try to be respectful. "Blessed how?" He waves his hand vaguely. "You know, sand, chanting, sun magic, something like that." "Right," you reply, because the gossip network doesn't run on truth. It runs on enthusiasm. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient marketplaces were hubs of public information. News, rumours, political talk, temple updates, everything spread here first. There were no newspapers, no radio, no town hall announcements. Instead, the entire city relied on word of mouth, which meant that one overheard conversation could snowball across districts in an hour. Your day is barely halfway through, and the news cycle is wild. Across from your stall, 2 older men sit on low stools trading gossip, like they're playing a competitive sport. One claims grain prices will rise because the Nile's flood wasn't strong enough this season. His friend insists the flood was fine, but the priests are hiding the real water measurements to increase temple offerings. They argue back and forth, each citing an uncle or neighbour or dream as proof. Historians still argue whether these kinds of debates reflect actual economic conditions or simply ancient men being dramatic for entertainment. Suddenly, someone shouts your name. You turn and see the spice seller from earlier waving his arms frantically. "Did you hear?" You sigh. "Apparently not." "They say a crocodile showed up near the river steps this morning." "Ah, yes. The daily crocodile rumour. These stories pop up constantly and are only true about 1/3 of the time." The spice seller leans closer and lowers his voice. "They say it stared at someone for a long time, a sign from Sobek himself." You nod. "Well, if a crocodile stared at me, I'd consider that a sign too." He laughs and hurries off to spread the tale further. A group of teenagers jog past your stall, whispering excitedly about a travelling storyteller who arrived with a new tale about a ghost in a granary. You mentally rate the story quality at medium. Ghosts have been overused this season. You need something fresh, like a cursed goose or a prophetic donkey. Speaking of which, a goat bleats loudly nearby, startling a group of customers into gasping as though someone announced a royal scandal. And in fact, a woman immediately uses that gasp as an opportunity to launch into the next rumour. "The pharaoh is planning a special ceremony at the temple next month. My cousin's husband's brother heard it from a guard." Interesting. Unlikely, but interesting. A quirky tidbit for you. Ancient Egyptians believed that the heart spoke truth, but the tongue often exaggerated it. Some people even carried small amulets shaped like hearts to remind them to stay honest. Ironically, these amulets were sold in marketplaces, the absolute worst place to expect honesty. Historians still argue whether these heart amulets were morality tools or early marketing gimmicks used by sellers to seem trustworthy. As the gossip continues flowing around you, you try to focus on your stall, but the marketplace is a river of conversations. You catch fragments. Someone complaining about their husband snoring so loudly it scared a cat. Someone bragging about baking bread with a secret ingredient. You pray it's not ground-up beans again. Someone ranting about their neighbour's rooster waking up too early and offending the local spirits. Then, somehow, the gossip inevitably turns toward you. A passing woman squints at your jars. "Is it true," she asks, "that your supplier found better quality clay this season?" You blink. Where did she hear that? You haven't even told your neighbour yet. You shrug diplomatically. "Possibly." She nods decisively. "I heard your jars survive falls now." You smile. "I wouldn't recommend testing that." She leaves, satisfied, absolutely planning to tell 5 more people. The marketplace gossip network never rests. It pulses, it spreads, it mutates. It's like a living creature, one fed by boredom, curiosity, and the irresistible urge to spice up daily life with shared stories. And you, whether you asked for it or not, are part of its ecosystem. You hear things, people tell you more things, you repeat the least ridiculous ones, you shake your head at the wild ones, and deep down you enjoy the constant buzz. It makes the long hours feel shorter. You settle onto your mat, listening to the ebb and flow of voices, and accept the truth every marketplace worker eventually learns. You can't stop gossip, but you can ride the wave. You feel the first real pangs of hunger tightening your stomach, a gentle but persistent reminder that you've been awake far too long without putting anything edible into your body. Around you, the marketplace has reached that strange midday lull. Not fully quiet, not fully busy, just hovering in a kind of drowsy equilibrium where everyone looks like they're debating whether to keep working or lie down dramatically in the nearest patch of shade. This is your cue, the unofficial lunch break. Not an organised one. Egyptians didn't do synchronised meal times, but more of a collective agreement that once the sun starts burning through brain cells, you'd better sit down and eat something before you pass out face first into your merchandise. You lower yourself onto your woven mat, which, yes, is still crooked from the goat attack. Reach under your table and pull out your modest meal, a small loaf of bread, an onion, a pinch of herbs, and a jar of thin beer. Simple, predictable, but comforting in its own dusty way. You tear off a chunk of bread and dip it lightly into the beer, softening it. This was a normal pairing in ancient Egypt. Bread and beer were the nutritional foundation that kept basically the entire population functioning. That's your mainstream historical fact for the section, delivered with love and carbs. You take your first bite, exhaling as the dryness crumbles across your tongue. A moment later, you take a sip of beer. It's warm. Of course it's warm, but still refreshing. Egyptians didn't drink beer the way modern people do. This stuff is more like liquid bread. Thick, lightly fermented, filling enough to keep you going through heat, work, and attacks from bipedal geese. As you chew, you take in the scene around you. The marketplace has softened. Sellers slump on stools. The spice row quiets into low murmurs. The donkey that nearly trampled your soul earlier is now asleep standing up, which is a skill you deeply respect. Even the goose is gone, probably terrorizing someone else's stall in another part of the market. 2 kids run past, chasing one another with reed whips, laughing loudly until an older woman scolds them for stirring up dust. A potter sits cross-legged beside his wheel, slowly shaping a small bowl, because some craftsmen keep working even during meals, as though rest is a myth invented to tempt the weak. A breeze stirs through the square, barely noticeable but still enough to ruffle your hair and carry the faint scent of grilled fish from a stall down the lane. You briefly consider buying some, but then you remember your budget and return to your bread with resigned affection. A friendly vendor from across the walkway waves at you holding his own lunch, a handful of dates and what looks suspiciously like leftover stew. "Quiet hour," he says with a sigh. "Finally," you reply, taking another bite. He chuckles. "It won't last." And he's absolutely right. It never lasts. Still, you savour the moment. This midday pause is the closest thing to peace the marketplace offers. You lean back slightly, letting the sun warm your face, letting the background noise fade into a pleasant hum. The heat is still brutal, but food makes everything softer around the edges. Animals, even, seem calmer at midday. A skinny black and white cat slips under your table, curls its tail around your leg and looks up expectantly. You break off a small piece of bread and place it on the ground. The cat sniffs, decides it is not impressed, and strolls away with offended dignity. Typical. As you nibble the onion, sharp, pungent, powerful enough to clear your sinuses, you notice a couple of workers from the granaries walking by with baskets. One of them lifts his water skin and pours a little on the ground in a V shape. A gesture of thanks to the Nile, maybe, or an old habit passed down. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians believed that spilling the first sip of drink onto the earth helped cool the spirits below and prevented bad luck. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine spiritual practice or just a socially acceptable way of sharing a drink with thirsty sand. As your hunger fades and your energy begins creeping back, you hear soft music drifting from the edge of the market. Someone's plucking a lute, slow, droning notes that weave pleasantly through the heat. It's one of those melodies that makes you feel like you're sitting underwater or dreaming while awake. You let yourself sway to it a little. No one notices. Everyone is too tired to judge. A traveller sits near the musician, resting under a patch of shade, telling a story about a merchant caravan ambushed by bandits who demanded nothing but spices. You laugh quietly. Either the bandits were desperate or someone in their group had a very elaborate dinner planned. A few stalls down, two women share food and gossip, occasionally glancing in your direction and giggling, about something you will definitely hear a twisted version of later. You smile. Gossip doesn't stop for meal breaks, it merely marinates. You finish your bread, wipe your hands on your tunic, and take one final sip of beer. It tastes slightly less warm. That counts as victory. For a moment you close your eyes and breathe deeply. You let the marketplace hum around you, gentle and rhythmic, like a lullaby made of distant voices, animal mutters, clinking pottery, and rustling reed canopies. This is the calm at the centre of the storm, a brief oasis in a desert of noise and heat. Then, right on cue, someone yells, "Who ate my figs?" You sigh, knowing exactly what comes next. Lunch is over. Time to dive back into the swirling heart of the marketplace. You brush the crumbs from your lap, stand up, stretch your back, which cracks loudly enough to make a nearby cat glare at you, and return fully to the flow of the marketplace. The midday lull is dissolving. The sun still bakes the earth, but people are waking from their heat-induced stupor. And as you look down the main walkway, you see one of your favourite parts of Egyptian market life coming to life: the craftsmen at work. Unlike some vendors who merely sell things, these artisans make their goods right there in public. Their stalls double as miniature workshops, filling the market with the clatter of tools, the scrape of wood, the squish of clay, and the rhythmic tapping of hammers. It's like strolling through an ancient DIY show, except there's no safety equipment, more sand, and considerably more shouting. The potter you noticed earlier, still grumpy from the inspectors and possibly still mourning the earlier gossip about his apprentice, sits now at his wheel. His foot pumps steadily, causing the disc to whirl in a smooth, hypnotic rotation. A lump of clay sits in the centre, slowly taking shape as his hands guide it. He's focused, intense, hunched over like he's coaxing a shy creature into revealing its final form. You watch the bowl rise, wobble, then settle into symmetry. It's strangely soothing. Pottery was one of the most common crafts in ancient Egypt, and your mainstream historical fact of the section. Many pottery pieces were intentionally made right in marketplaces because buyers preferred watching their goods being shaped. It felt more honest, more connected to the earth, or maybe just more entertaining. The potter glances up at you briefly. "Hot," he mutters. "Always," you reply. He nods with the solemnity of someone discussing philosophy rather than temperature. A few stalls over, a carpenter kneels beside a half-finished stool. He's using a bronze chisel and a wooden mallet, shaving thin curls from the leg with practiced precision. The shavings drift to the ground like curled paper, and a boy sweeps them into a basket to sell later as fire starter. Nothing goes to waste here, not even wood scraps. The carpenter lifts the stool, inspects it, then gives it a gentle tap as though listening to its opinion. It doesn't respond, which is probably for the best. You move on to the bead maker, a young woman working under a low canopy. She threads tiny faience beads onto linen string with astonishing speed. Her fingers dance through blues, greens, and whites, forming patterned strands destined to become bracelets or amulets. She notices you watching and smiles. Want one? You shake your head. If I start buying beads, I'll go home broke. You'd go home looking amazing, though, she says with a wink. You laugh. She's not wrong. Beside her, another craftsman uses a small stone drill, spinning it with a simple bow-like tool to carve holes into tiny shell discs. The steady whir, whir, whir blends into the ambient chatter. A quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptian drills often used sand as an abrasive, applying grit to the drill tip so it could cut through harder materials. Historians still argue whether this method was an Egyptian innovation or adapted from earlier desert cultures. You step back slightly, letting a customer squeeze past. He leans close to the beadmaker's display, inspecting a necklace with a face so serious it looks like he's evaluating military strategy rather than jewelry. Nearby, a young girl watches the artisans with awe, clutching a worn rag doll. You can tell by her expression she wants to grow up and make something here. Many craft skills were passed down through families, but some people, especially girls, learned by watching in the marketplace, absorbing every detail like tiny human sponges. Across the lane, the leatherworker is mid-argument with a man holding a sandal. The sandal has clearly lived a long and tragic life. Its straps dangle, its sole flaps sadly, and the leatherworker is explaining, in increasingly theatrical tones, that no amount of craftsmanship can resurrect this thing from the dead. The customer insists he's fixed worse. They begin bargaining over repair prices anyway, because Egyptians will argue over anything if copper weights are involved. Further along, a metalworker hammers bronze into shape. Sparks flicker softly in the sunlight, bouncing off the dusty ground. You keep your distance. Bronze fragments hurt, and you've already used up your daily quota of near-death experiences. He dips the metal in water, steam rising in a small hiss. He wears a strip of cloth around his head, drenched from sweat and river water. You admire his stamina. Working with fire in this heat is something only the incredibly strong or incredibly stubborn can do. A boy next to him uses a hand bellows to feed air into a small clay furnace. Each pump of air makes the coals glow brighter. He grins proudly every time the fire crackles louder. The metalworker hardly glances at him, but you can tell he depends on the kid's rhythm. Craftsmen and their apprentices form silent partnerships like that. It's part teaching, part teamwork, part mild yelling when the apprentice gets distracted. Closer to your stall, a basket weaver sits amidst coils of papyrus fibers, weaving a new mat. His fingers move so fast they blur, braiding strips into tight, symmetrical patterns. You watch him for a moment, noticing how each tug tightens the structure. The weaver doesn't look up, but he says, "Want a new mat?" You grin. "Mine is still alive." Barely. He snorts. Barely is one wind gust away from dead. He's right, of course, but you pretend not to hear. The craft stalls add a comforting rhythm to the marketplace. They anchor the space, reminding everyone that while some goods are bought and sold, others are created right here under the same blazing sun. There's something grounding about watching raw materials transform into useful or beautiful things in real time. You inhale deeply, the scent of wood shavings, clay dust, heated bronze, and feel a strange little bubble of peace. Then a man nearby shouts, "Stop him!" and the peace evaporates. A chicken has escaped. Again. The beadmaker drops her string. The carpenter sighs like this happens every day, because it does. The potter pauses mid-spin. You step back as the chicken darts under your table, wings flapping, trailing chaos like a feathery comet. A small child chases after it, laughing with the glee of someone who never has to chase their own merchandise. The chicken bursts out from under your stall, nearly toppling your jars, and sprints down the row, weaving through stools, baskets, and confused customers. People cheer, someone trips, someone else swears softly. It's a whole spectacle. You look around at the mix of laughter, annoyance, artistry, and chaos and realize this is the living heart of the market, creation and catastrophe intertwined in one long, dusty tapestry. You sit down again, tuck your belongings closer, and brace yourself, because the day isn't over. And if the craftspeople are this lively, the next wave of customers will be twice as wild. You're just settling back into your stall, hands resting on your knees, breath steadying, when the air shifts in that subtle but unmistakable way that makes every vendor in the marketplace collectively groan. A breeze, a strange one. Not the refreshing, cool kind that brings momentary relief, but the mischievous, sand-carrying, chaos-brewing kind that signals the arrival of an unwelcome midday guest, the desert wind. It starts softly, a whisper along the ground, little ripples of dust curling around table legs like curious cats. You squint upward, and the reed canopies overhead rustle with a warning tremble. You mutter under your breath, "Not now." The marketplace does not care. The breeze strengthens. A few pieces of papyrus flutter loose from a scribe's folder, swirling dramatically through the air like fleeing birds. He panics, scrambling after them and shouting accusations at the gods, the wind, and one innocent child who was merely standing nearby. You tighten your grip on your table as the wind takes a bold leap from mischievous to problematic. Here it comes. A wave of sand sweeps through the lane, not enough to blind you, but absolutely enough to redecorate your entire inventory. Your jars now have that freshly dusted by desert spirits look that no customer appreciates. You reach out to brush them off, only for the wind to immediately recoat them, like it's mocking you personally. A potter yells from across the way. "Tie down your mat!" You shout back, "I am!" while kneeling to smooth the corners that keep trying to escape like dissatisfied pets. The wind whistles through gaps between stalls, creating that eerie flute-like sound ancient marketplaces were unfortunately famous for. A mainstream historical fact. Desert towns in Egypt often dealt with sudden gusts of wind kicking up sand, which made marketplaces scramble to protect goods. Canopies were tied lower, mats weighted down, and sellers often worked with one foot pressed against their table legs to keep them from tipping. You do exactly that now, one foot braced, one hand pressing your jars into a neat cluster so they don't roll off. The wind pulls at your tunic like a child begging for attention. You ignore it, focusing on not losing your entire livelihood to a breeze with attitude. Then the laughter begins, because chaos loves company. Down the row, the beadmaker's tray flips, sending a sparkling cascade of beads rolling everywhere, greens, blues, whites scattering like a very angry rainbow. She curses, dives after them, scooping frantically before they vanish into the dust. 3 children instantly join the hunt, gleefully grabbing beads as though they've discovered treasure. She snatches a few back from their fists with the speed of a seasoned warrior. Meanwhile, the carpenter's wood shavings take flight, swirling upward in a tiny tornado that lands directly in the hair of an unfortunate customer. The customer freezes, slowly reaches up, touches the nest of curls now embedded with shavings, and gives the carpenter a look that could turn a pharaoh to stone. The wind grows stronger still, lifting small baskets, flipping lids, sending herbs tumbling like confetti. A vendor selling salt shrieks as her product becomes a salt and sand blend, which is decidedly not market-worthy. You grab your cloth cover and try to drape it over your herbs. The wind yanks it immediately. You grab again. The wind tugs back. It's basically tug-of-war with weather. And then it hits. A flying onion. You don't even see it coming. Just a swift thunk against your shin, followed by a rolling onion settling at your feet like it meant to drop in for a chat. You sigh, pick it up and toss it back toward the onion seller, who's too busy shouting at the sky to notice. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind as you wrestle with your cover. Some Egyptians carried small amulets shaped like feathers or palm branches to guard against desert winds, believing they symbolically cut the breeze. Did they work? Historians still argue whether these charms were practical talismans or just trendy accessories sold by over-enthusiastic merchants. Another gust hits your stall. This one is bold, lifting the edge of your awning and nearly flinging it backward. You grab the sport post with both hands, gritting your teeth. A nearby vendor shouts, "Brace it! The worst gust always comes second!" This is, without question, the most accurate piece of weather wisdom ever spoken. You plant your feet, you tighten your grip, you take a deep breath. The wind roars through the market like a charging bull. Your awning bows violently, flapping like it wants to break free and pursue a career as a migrating banner. Dust blasts sideways across your stall. Sand stings your cheeks. For a moment you can't see anything but swirling brown haze. A customer walking past covers their head with a basket and hurries blindly through the storm. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the wind begins to fade, dust settles, reeds stop rattling. Loose cloth drifts gently to the ground like tired birds returning to roost. You blink through the haze. Your stall survived. Mostly. Your jars are dusty, your herbs scattered, your mat slightly more diagonal than mathematically possible, but it's all still there. You shake out your cloth cover, cough twice, and pat your belongings back into neat little lines. All around you, vendors begin cleaning, reorganizing, muttering curses, laughing even. The potter brushes sand out of his bowl on the wheel. The beadmaker rethreads her colours one by one. The carpenter picks wood shavings out of his beard with quiet shame. A few customers reappear, blinking like confused owls emerging from burrows. Then someone shouts triumphantly, "The chicken is back!" The chicken sprints by, wings half spread, sand trailing behind it like a comet. The marketplace collectively groans. You sit down, breathe deeply, and let a slow smile curl across your face. Sandstorm or not, the day goes on, and so do you. The sand has barely settled when the next unmistakable sound rises from the far end of the marketplace. A sharp clap followed by a booming voice that instantly slices through every conversation. You know that voice. Everyone knows that voice. It belongs to the auctioneer, the loudest, most dramatic human being within a 50-mile radius, and his corner of the market, the auction area, is officially open for business. You close your eyes for a brief second because you know what's coming. Noise, a tidal wave of it. The kind of noise that rattles your ribcage like someone knocking on a wooden door from the inside. You brace yourself, then look up as people begin drifting toward the commotion, drawn like moths to a fire fueled by copper weights and questionable impulse purchases. With no customers hovering at your stall in this moment, you decide to wander closer. Not too close, because auction crowds behave like stampeding goats, but close enough to watch the show. The auctioneer stands proudly on a raised crate, chest puffed out, arms wide, mouth already mid-yell. He looks like someone carved a statue of maximum confidence, and then brought it to life with caffeine. His linen tunic flaps dramatically in the lingering breeze, making him look slightly supernatural. He thrives on this. The man could probably shout underwater. Before him lies an assortment of goods, baskets, tools, bundles of reeds, a few battered stools, jars of uncertain origin, an enormous fish wrapped in palm leaves, and, of course, a monkey. A small brown monkey chewing lazily on a fig while staring at the audience with the bored arrogance of royalty. You step into the outer ring of the crowd just as the auctioneer slaps his hand on a crate and shouts, "First item of the day! A beautiful, sturdy, perfectly loyal stool." The stool in question wobbles slightly. Someone in the audience mutters, "It's possessed." A woman elbows him. Everything is possessed if you look hard enough. The auctioneer lifts the stool over his head triumphantly, ignoring its little creak of structural anxiety. "Who will give me 2 copper for this fine piece of craftsmanship?" "Half a copper," someone shouts. He slams the stool down so hard it nearly collapses. "Half a copper? For this treasure? That's an insult to both the stool and the gods." Everyone laughs, and that's your mainstream historical fact. Auctions really were part of Egyptian marketplaces, particularly for used goods, seized property, or items brought by travelling merchants. They were loud, theatrical events where the auctioneer's charisma mattered almost as much as the merchandise. Some descriptions carved on ostraca describe auctioneers as wind-voiced men, which basically means extremely loud professionals. The man continues shouting, bouncing from item to item with a speed that feels almost supernatural. "Next, you there, yes you, I see you admiring this fine basket, woven by an artisan with hands blessed by Hathor herself. Look at these fibres." He shakes the basket vigorously, several fibres fray. "That's new damage," a spectator yells. "Aesthetic enhancement," the auctioneer retorts. The crowd roars with laughter. A group of older men stand at the front, squinting skeptically at each item. They whisper to each other, strategizing like gamblers analyzing chariot races. One pokes the stool with his toe, another sniffs a rope coil. The third looks at the monkey and shakes his head. "Not again," he mutters. "Last time I bought a monkey, it stole my wife's wig." Meanwhile, the monkey senses its moment and climbs onto the auctioneer's shoulder. The crowd claps. The monkey raises the fig like it's delivering a victory speech. Children cheer. The auctioneer beams as though this was absolutely planned. You overhear a seller next to you whisper, "That monkey has been auctioned 6 times this month." "People keep returning it," someone replies. And yet, the seller sighs, they keep bidding. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Some Egyptians believed monkeys could mimic human speech during eclipses and full moons. Did anyone ever prove this? Absolutely not. Historians still argue whether this belief was symbolic, metaphorical, or just ancient people blaming monkeys for repeating their secrets. The auction proceeds in glorious chaos. A broken chisel sells for more than a brand new one because two men got into a stubborn bidding war fueled entirely by bruised pride. A chipped jar goes for a surprisingly high price because the auctioneer declared it, historically, significant, though he did not specify how or in what universe. A pile of old sandals sells in bulk, leading one woman to declare triumphantly, "My husband won't have an excuse anymore." The monkey, apparently bored with its co-host role, suddenly leaps into the crowd, scattering figs and shrieks. It lands on a man's head, steals his headcloth and bolts. Children sprint after it, laughing hysterically. The auctioneer doesn't skip a beat. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, our final item of the afternoon, a very excited monkey. Someone yells, "I'll take it." You pray they know what they're doing. As the crowd disperses slightly to chase the monkey, the auctioneer slaps his crate again and wipes sweat from his brow. He looks utterly alive, energized in a way only charismatic chaos enthusiasts can be. Auctions do that to people. They're irresistible whirlpools of noise, urgency, and competitiveness, and the marketplace feeds on that energy like fuel. You step back a little, letting people stream past you. Some brag about winning bids, others gloat about deals they think they got. A few complain loudly that the auctioneer is a trickster, he is, who oversells junk, also true, but keeps coming back anyway, because entertainment is priceless. A middle-aged woman walks by carrying a lopsided stool under one arm and a string of onions in the other. She gives you a bright grin. "I got this for a bargain." You nod politely. "Congratulations." As soon as she walks away, the stool leg falls off. You wince. She does not notice. The auctioneer calls out one final announcement, "Back tonight for the evening sale," before hopping off his crate and immediately wandering off in search of cold beer and shade. He deserves it. The marketplace exhales collectively now that his thunder is over. Voices returning to normal volume, like someone just turned down the world's loudest volume knob. You return to your stall slowly. Behind you, the monkey streaks past in a blur of fur and chaos, still holding the stolen headcloth like a victorious banner. Just another auction day. Just another lesson in the fine art of marketplace madness. You smile to yourself as you settle in again, because somehow, despite the absurdity, you love every second of this. You've barely sat back down when a soft perfumed breeze drifts your way. Not the dusty chaotic kind from earlier, but a gentle, sweet, resin-heavy scent. It coils through the air like a ribbon, delicate but unmistakable. You inhale and the smell settles in your lungs with the warm familiarity of temple incense. It can only mean one thing. You're approaching the part of the market where traders sell sacred offerings. Even before you stand, you can hear the difference. This corner sounds calmer. Not quiet exactly, just softer. No shouting prices. No haggling at top volume. No goats committing petty crimes. Instead, you hear murmurs, low discussions, careful steps, the clink of delicate jars, the rustle of woven pouches filled with powdered incense. The sacred offerings traders cultivate an atmosphere that feels mildly holy, even though you know perfectly well that they are just as ruthless about prices as everyone else here. You stroll in that direction, drawn by the incense trail. The crowd thins slightly as you walk, and the colours shift. More whites, creams, soft yellows. The stalls around you glow with subtle beauty. Polished stones, dried herbs with strange shapes, tiny wooden statues, polished shells, bundles of papyrus labelled for ritual use. And everywhere, scent. Layers and layers of scent. At one stall, a woman sits cross-legged behind rows of small alabaster jars arranged so precisely they look like they were placed by the gods themselves. She uncorks one when she notices you, tilting it gently in your direction. A thin line of incense smoke escapes, winding upward in a silky ribbon. "Myrrh blended with juniper," she says in a voice so soft it feels like it's part of the smoke. "Calming, good for evening offerings, or calming a temperamental goose." You snort before you can stop yourself. "Do you have something stronger? The goose today nearly ascended me." She smiles knowingly. "Frankincense stronger than myrrh, but more expensive." "Of course it is." Here's your mainstream historical fact for this section. Frankincense and myrrh were among the most valuable imported goods in ancient Egypt, used for temple rituals, burials, cosmetics, and medicine. They came from Punt, whose exact location historians still argue about, and were transported at enormous expense. Vendors selling such goods often acted half merchant, half ritual advisor, reassuring customers that yes, this jar will absolutely please whichever deity you're hoping to impress. You thank the woman and move on, drifting deeper into the fragrant maze. A man nearby is selling small amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus, tiny ankhs, miniature scarabs, and protective palm-shaped charms. His table sparkles with polished stones and glazed faience, each piece claiming to offer good luck, protection, or blessings of some kind. He picks up a scarab and holds it out to you. For protection, he says, against envy, evil eye, maybe geese. Everyone keeps mentioning the goose, you reply. He shrugs. Fearsome creatures. Even gods keep a respectful distance. You're starting to think this goose has a reputation in the entire district. A group of women approach the amulet seller carrying baskets filled with small temple offerings, bread, flowers, little clay bowls. They speak in hushed tones, discussing which items to buy for the temple festival happening next week. One of them holds up a small lotus-shaped incense burner. This one, she says, the priest said lotus scent carries prayers, Father. Her friend rolls her eyes. Or he said that so you'd spend more money. A third woman leans in dramatically. Historians will argue about that someday. You chuckle under your breath as they continue debating between the prayer-expanding burner and the evil eye-resistant burner, both marketed with the confidence of someone who could sell sand to a desert. You turn toward a table showcasing dried herbs bundled with twine, sage, mint, thyme, blue lotus petals, and something black and crumbly that smells faintly of licorice. The vendor, an elderly man with eyebrows like storm clouds, explains each one's ritual purpose with solemn pride. This, he says, holding up the licorice-like crumble, drives away bad luck. And this one, you ask, pointing to a pale yellow herb, keeps nightmares away. And this? He holds up a green sprig. That one keeps your mother-in-law away. You burst into laughter. He does not smile. You can't tell if he's joking. As you wander further, you spot small baskets filled with votive figurines, tiny clay shapes of gods, animals, and little human figures. People buy them to leave as offerings in shrines and temples. They're simplistic, charming, and strangely emotional. One depicts a woman kneeling with a jar. Another shows a man carrying a loaf. These miniature tokens carry prayers inside them, or so people believe. You feel a faint tug in your chest. Maybe you'll buy one someday, when business improves, when the heat gets easier, when your mat stops being haunted by the memory of that sandstorm. Further down, a man with a shaved head and multiple bead necklaces sits behind piles of incense cones shaped like small pyramids. He lights one for demonstration, and smoke curls upward, spreading through the air like a lazy river. The scent is warm, woody, ancient. You inhale deeply, feeling your shoulders unclench. Made from ground resins and honey, he says proudly. Burns longer than plain incense. You nod. Smells like a temple. He lifts his chin. It is temple incense, or at least good enough that the priests won't complain. Then he lowers his voice dramatically. Unless they're in a complaining mood. Priests are unpredictable. You raise an eyebrow. And expensive, you add. Oh, always, he agrees instantly. A quirky tidbit rolls into your mind unbidden. Some Egyptians believed incense smoke carried messages directly to the gods, acting as a hotline to the divine, but others thought it simply purified the air, making temple rituals more pleasant. Historians still argue which interpretation was the original belief, or if it was both. Religion meets aromatherapy. You continue wandering until you reach a small display of ritual oils: lotus, almond, cedar, lily. The vendor invites you to inhale each scent gently. You do. Instantly, your entire stress level drops by 3 hieroglyphs. You close your eyes for a second, letting the fragrance drift across your thoughts like smooth water. When you open them, you catch sight of something surprising. Your goose nemesis, standing proudly atop a basket of temple flowers, like it owns the entire sacred offerings district. Of course. A group of women shriek. One man shouts, "Shoo!" The goose honks majestically, an ancient holy terror, and hops down, strutting between stalls as though inspecting everyone's offerings for divine approval. The vendors groan in despair. You laugh quietly. You're starting to like this goose. You inhale one last breath of incense-heavy air, savouring the calm, the mystique, the faint pretending of holiness that floats like dust in this corner of the marketplace. It feels good here, different, quieter, softer, but the day is moving forward, and more chaos awaits. So you turn back toward your stall, carrying the lingering sense of myrrh and lotus with you like invisible souvenirs. You haven't even settled fully back at your stall when the atmosphere of the market shifts again, not in temperature, not in noise, but in texture. A new layer settles over the crowd like someone added a subtle spice to the air. You know this feeling well. It means the foreign merchants have arrived. They always enter the marketplace the same way, in a loose caravan, moving with measured confidence, carrying goods wrapped in woven cloth, stacked in baskets, slung across donkeys or human shoulders. Their accents drip like different dialectal rivers, Nubian rhythms, Levantine edges, soft Mediterranean lilts, all blending into a symphony that tells you the world is much larger than this dusty square. Your eyes are drawn immediately to the first group, Nubian traders. They're tall, draped in vibrant fabrics far more colourful than the muted Egyptian palette of this region. One of them is carrying a carved wooden box with intricate patterns burned into its surface. Another leads a donkey with bundles wrapped in leather. Their laughter is deep and warm, echoing with familiarity. Nubian merchants have been trading with Egyptians for centuries, especially in gold, cattle, and incense. There's your mainstream historical fact. One of them spots you watching and gives a friendly nod. You return it because Nubian traders are famous for two things: their impeccable sense of humour and their ability to outbargain even the most stubborn Egyptian. Grandmother. A Nubian woman sets up a cloth on the ground and begins unpacking unusual clay jars, shapes you haven't seen before, decorated with swirling patterns. A small crowd gathers almost instantly. People love new things, even if they don't know what they're looking at. The woman explains each jar in a melodic accent, describing them as vessels for storing oils and perfumes. Her hands gesture beautifully, fluid, expressive. Customers lean forward, captivated. You hear someone whisper, "She could sell sand to the desert." You smile. She probably could. Just a few feet away, merchants from Canaan begin unfurling their goods. Bright textiles dyed in blues and purples far richer than anything you can produce locally. Blue dye is rare and difficult to make. Purple is even more expensive. The sight of these colours alone pulls half the market in their direction. One of the Canaanites lifts a bolt of indigo cloth, letting it shimmer in the sunlight so dramatically that you suspect he's practiced the motion 1,000 times. People gasp, not politely but audibly, like a chorus of impressed pigeons. You can't blame them. It really is beautiful. You hear your neighbour murmur, "If I buy that, my wife will love me forever," or yell at me for overspending. Hard to say, you laugh. Why not both? Nearby, two traders with Mediterranean accents, possibly from Cyprus or even further, open crates filled with copper tools, small decorative bowls, and jewellery made of shells and glass. Their goods gleam in the sun, smooth and refined. A little too refined. Egyptians love their craftsmanship, but something foreign and exotic. That always draws curious eyes. One of the Mediterranean merchants lays down a necklace made of blue-green glass beads, perfectly rounded like droplets of water. A teenage girl gasps so loudly her mother elbows her in embarrassment. The merchant sees this reaction and smiles with the calm confidence of someone who already knows he has made a sale. You drift closer, listening to their accents. The Mediterranean men speak a language you don't fully understand, but bits of it overlap with the trade jargon used all across the coast. Numbers, weights, negotiation cues, a universal tongue of merchants. One of them greets you in broken Egyptian. "You look. Good price today." You raise an eyebrow. "Does anyone ever get a good price today?" He laughs heartily. "For you? Maybe. Maybe not." A gust of wind lifts the fringe of his headcloth, revealing a bronze earring shaped like a tiny spiral. You wonder what distant harbour he bought it from. As you move on, you spot another group, the desert caravan traders. Their clothes are dusty, worn, sun-bleached from long travel. They carry exotic spices, leather goods, dried fruits, and sometimes the rarest treasures, stories from far-off places. People gather around them as eagerly for the tales as for the merchandise. One trader unfurls a small rug embroidered, with geometric designs you've never seen. The crowd murmurs approvingly. Another reveals a pouch of dried berries, so red and vibrant they look impossible in this dusty land. A bold customer points to a small sealed jar. "What's that?" The trader smiles slyly. "Medicine." "For what?" He opens the jar and lets people sniff. They recoil. "For strong problems," he clarifies. A kid nearby whispers to his friend, "Do you think it can cure my father's snoring?" The friend whispers back, "Nothing can cure that." You continue walking, taking in the whirl of accents, textures, scents, and expressions. It's incredible how the marketplace transforms when foreign merchants arrive. It becomes wider, deeper, more colourful. You feel for a moment like you're standing at the crossroads of the ancient world. And yet, foreign goods bring foreign tensions too. A local vendor mutters under his breath, "They'll take all my customers." Another grumbles, "Their prices are too low." A woman whispers to her companion, "Last time I bought imported perfume, my husband accused me of spending temple money." Gossip spreads instantly, as always, and misunderstandings travel even faster across cultural lines. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians believed that foreign traders possessed magical charms that made their goods appear more valuable. Historians still argue whether this was literal magic or just jealousy disguised as superstition. You pass by a Nubian trader again. This time he's offering samples of some fragrant oil. He dabs a little on your wrist before you can refuse. The scent is warm, spicy, strange, but alluring. "You like it?" he asks with a grin. "It's different," you admit. He laughs. "Different is good. Different makes people curious." You walk away, letting the scent linger. A child tugs at his mother's robe, pointing at a foreign merchant's exotic bird perched on a wooden pole. The bird squawks melodically, earning a delighted squeal from the child, and a deeply unimpressed glare from your goose nemesis, who has appeared yet again like it's on patrol duty. The foreign merchants bring life, energy, contrast, and yes, mild chaos to the market. Their presence reminds you of how trade connects distant lands, how goods and stories travel across deserts and seas, and how cultures brush against each other in small, meaningful ways. You breathe in the mix of incense, spices, foreign fabrics, and the faint scent of opportunity. Then you turn back toward your stall because more customers are coming, and you're ready. You make it only halfway back to your stall before you hear the telltale sound, the sharp intake of breath, the rising note of outrage, the unmistakable, "Oh no, here we go again," energy that ripples through the market like a pebble tossed into water. Someone is about to start a fight. Not a real fight. Not knives, not fists, but the uniquely dramatic, wildly, unnecessary, emotionally athletic kind of argument only an Egyptian marketplace can produce. You stop. You sigh. You mentally stretch, because watching marketplace conflicts is basically cardio. To your left, two women stand facing each other, both clutching identical baskets of onions. One claims the other stole her preferred bunch. The other insists she grabbed it fair and square. The onion seller caught between them looks like he'd rather be reborn as a quiet papyrus plant somewhere far from humans. "It was mine," the first woman shrieks. "You put your hand on it, not your money," the second counters. "Hands count." "Since when?" "Since always." The onion seller raises his hands helplessly. "Ladies, please, there are many onions on earth." They ignore him entirely. This is typical. Marketplace disputes are legendary. Not dangerous, not harmful, but deeply dramatic. Everyone becomes a performer. Everyone has an audience. Egyptians loved a good verbal sparring match almost as much as they loved fresh bread. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Written records on ostraca and papyri show dozens of documented disputes in marketplaces over prices, weights, stolen goods, space boundaries, misplaced baskets, even customers accusing sellers of giving the wrong aura, whatever that meant. Conflicts were common, but rarely violent, mostly loud, very loud. As you sidestep the onion duel, another argument erupts behind you, this time between two men, one a craftsman holding a half-finished stool, the other a customer examining it like it's a failed piece of architecture. "You said it would hold any weight," the customer insists. The craftsman bristles. It will, just not sudden weight. What does that mean? It means if you sit like a human, it's fine. If you throw yourself onto it like a sack of grain, it will protest. People nearby nod sagely. This sounds reasonable. A child pipes up. My father sat on a stool once and it broke. Everyone turns to the craftsman. The craftsman crosses his arms. Your father weighs as much as a fat camel, the crowd gasps. The camel dealer from earlier shouts, Hey! The craftsman waves apologetically. No offence to camels. The camel dealer grunts. Better not be. The child, thrilled by the drama, sprints off to spread the insult. You continue navigating through the rising chorus of bickering when yet another disagreement sparks. A pot seller arguing with a customer who insists a pot has a bad spirit inside it because it wobbled when placed on the ground. The pot seller retorts, The spirit is you not placing it correctly. It moved on its own. It did not. My cousin's friend's mother can sense spirits. She said it looked haunted. Oh yes. Well, I can sense customers who don't want to pay full price. The crowd hoots. Someone yells, Haunted pot! I want to see! And suddenly, 20 people gather around, poking the pot like it might scream. A quirky tidbit bubbles into your mind. Egyptians genuinely believed objects could carry spiritual residue, especially household items used repeatedly. So a haunted pot wasn't entirely beyond the realm of acceptable belief. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual superstition, psychological projection, or clever merchants using enchanted items as marketing tactics. As the pot debate grows, a new conflict flares 2 stalls down. This time, a goat is involved. Of course it is. Your nemesis goose is nowhere in sight. Thank the gods. But a goat, possibly the same troublemaker from earlier, has inserted itself into a fruit seller's stall and begun sampling figs as though attending a free buffet. The fruit seller is screaming. The goat is chewing calmly. The crowd is delighted. Stop him! The seller cries. Someone shouts back, You stop him! He's your goat! He is not. The goat bleats loudly, as though declaring independence. A teen attempts to grab it by the horns. The goat dips its head, swerves elegantly, and the boy tumbles into a pile of hay. Laughter erupts. The fruit seller holds his head like he's about to faint. What am I going to tell my wife? He moans. Tell her the goat had good taste, someone yells. The fruit seller glares at them, because that is not helpful. You duck away before the goat notices you and decides to continue its vendetta. Meanwhile, at the far end of the lane, a group of foreign merchants start arguing with a local vendor over the pronunciation of a word involving weight measurements. Each side insists the other is wrong. Neither side is correct. People gather to listen. A few even take sides. The argument becomes a linguistic tug-of-war that no one wins. Finally, the argument dies out, not because it's resolved, but because everyone gets tired. That's how marketplace conflicts usually end, not with solutions, but with exhaustion. You make it back to your stall just as 2 elderly women argue passionately over the price of garlic. One claims she bought garlic cheaper in another market. The other argues that this garlic is obviously larger, juicier, spiritually blessed, and therefore superior. You're exaggerating, someone tells her. She points dramatically at the heavens. The gods know the truth. The garlic seller nods gravely, as though she's not wildly overselling produce. You settle onto your mat again, pinching the bridge of your nose. The noise, the tension, the bickering, it all swirls around you like a storm made of stubbornness and onions. And yet, there's something undeniably comforting about it. These conflicts are familiar, predictable, harmless. The marketplace isn't truly alive without at least 5 different arguments happening at the same time. A customer approaches your stall, glancing nervously at the surrounding drama. You smile warmly, hoping to reassure them. Don't worry, you say, it's completely normal. They nod, unconvinced. You gesture around. This is a calm day, actually. They widen their eyes in horror. A vendor 2 stalls down shrieks, Who threw this turnip? You sigh deeply, but you smile too, because this is the marketplace. Everyone is loud, everyone is dramatic, everyone is alive, and somehow, in the middle of the chaos, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else. You settle your elbows on your knees and glance toward the edge of the marketplace, toward the shimmering ribbon of blue that has shaped every life here long before you were born, the Nile. You can't see it directly from your stall, but you can feel it. Everyone can. The river is like a quiet heartbeat beneath the noise, steady and dependable. Even in the chaos of gossip, arguments, and goose-based terrorism, The Nile sets the rhythm of work, trade, moods, and fortunes. You take a slow breath as a warm gust glides through the market, carrying a faint smell of water reeds and wet mud. Someone nearby mutters, "The river's breathing today," and you nod because it feels true. The Nile influences everything. Prices, crowds, tempers, even the arrival times of boats and caravans. It's the marketplace's invisible supervisor. A fisherman walks past your stall, balancing a basket of fresh tilapia on his shoulder. His sandals are still damp. He smells like the river, a little sharp, a little earthy, but honest. "Catch was good this morning," he says proudly. "Congratulations," you reply. He shrugs. "Thank the river, not me." That's your mainstream historical fact. Egyptian life was dependent on the Nile's rhythms to an almost spiritual degree. When the waters rose in the flood season, cities rejoiced. When they didn't rise enough, everyone worried, merchants included. A low flood meant fewer crops, fewer animals, fewer goods to trade, fewer customers with money to spend. Even now, you sometimes catch yourself glancing toward the river with the instinctive question, how generous will it be this year? As you're thinking this, you notice a small group of grain sellers consulting with one another, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. You're close enough to catch snippets. Water level dropping? The priests say it's early. Prices might rise tomorrow. Marketplace gossip is one thing, but river gossip is a different beast. River news spreads fast because it affects everyone. If the water is low, farmers panic, priests interpret omens, merchants adjust prices, and you brace yourself for customers who suddenly believe that every jar you sell is part of a larger conspiracy. A woman stops at your stall and touches one of your jars thoughtfully. "If the flood is weak this year," she says, "everyone will be hoarding grain." You nod. People panic easily. She leans closer. Historians will argue whether they panicked too much or not enough. You blink. Historians? She shrugs. It's a feeling. You decide not to question it. Another breeze rolls in, cooler this time, carrying the faintest spray of moisture. It hits your face gently, not enough to cool you down, but enough to loosen your shoulders. People look up instinctively, searching the horizon. Even the donkeys and goats seem to pause, as though checking for a message only they can interpret. Near the market entrance, two children sprint through the walkway carrying makeshift toy boats carved out of scrap wood. They shout, "Race you to the river," as they disappear into the crowd. You can almost picture them kneeling on the muddy banks, sending their boats off in wild, crooked paths downstream. Another child passes you with a tiny, freshly caught fish, flapping softly in his cupped hands. "Just pulled from the river," he announces triumphantly. "Does your mother know you stole her dinner?" you ask. He gasps, horrified, and runs away. You chuckle, wiping sweat from your brow. Meanwhile, at a stall across from you, a papyrus seller unfurls a fresh sheet, letting the breeze dry it. The strips of plant fibers glisten faintly. Papyrus depends on the Nile's abundance. No papyrus without water, no writing without papyrus, no scribes without writing, no bureaucracy, no markets, no anything. The whole system rests on the quiet river beyond the city's edge. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some Egyptians believed crocodiles were the river's guardians, sent by Sobek to monitor balance. People feared them, respected them, and occasionally blamed them for bad water years, because nothing motivates prayer quite like a reptile the size of a canoe. Historians still argue whether this belief was meant literally or symbolically, though honestly, if you've ever seen a crocodile close-up, symbolic is not the first interpretation. A vendor selling fish oil steps onto a crate and shouts, "Came in fresh with the morning tide, best quality. If the river is low tomorrow, don't blame me." And instantly 5 customers rush up, panic buying like he predicted famine. Someone bumps your stall in their hurry. You steady your jars, sighing. The river shapes mood. Hope swells with a good flood. Anxiety rises with a weak one. You've lived your whole life with this subtle emotional undertow. Some days it feels like you can sense the river's mood before you even look at it, as though it hums beneath your feet. A customer arrives at your stall next, wiping sweat from his neck. "Hot," he mutters, staring toward the distant water. "Makes you want to swim?" "Then why don't you?" you ask. He shivers dramatically. "Because crocodiles also want to swim." Fair point. A sudden burst of wind drifts through the walkway again, not sandy this time, but cool, carrying a faint touch of algae and wet shoreline. People sigh with relief. You inhale deeply, letting the moisture cling to your throat like a blessing. For a brief quiet moment the market slows, movement softens, voices lower. It's as though everyone silently aligns to the river's calmer pulse. Then, someone shrieks, "The goose is back!" and the moment evaporates. Your shoulders slump, noise surges, people scatter. But even as chaos resumes, you still feel that river breeze on your skin. A reminder that beneath all this noise and mess, the Nile keeps the world running. You lift a jar, wipe a thin layer of dust from its lid and whisper to yourself, "Thank you, river." Because even on days like this, you mean it. The peace you borrowed from the river doesn't last long, because as the sun slides lower in the sky, the marketplace undergoes its next transformation. The shadows stretch, the heat shifts from unbearable to merely rude, and the energy around you begins tightening like a drum being tuned. This is how you know. The evening rush is coming. You brace yourself. There is no warning horn, no temple bell, no official announcement. The rush simply appears, an unstoppable wave of humanity crashing through the stalls with purpose, hunger, and a very specific sense of urgency. People who avoided the scorching midday heat now flood the marketplace in search of dinner ingredients, last-minute goods, or whatever item they forgot to buy in the morning because they were distracted by gossip, arguments, or goose-related emergencies. It starts with a trickle, a few shoppers drifting through looking thoughtful, then a cluster, then, out of nowhere, a surge. A woman appears at your stall so suddenly you nearly drop a jar. "How much for this?" she demands, pointing to your second-best jar like it personally offended her. You tell her. She gasps. "Are you trying to rob me?" You smile because you know exactly how this game works. "It was cheaper earlier," you say. Evening rush increases prices. "So I'm being punished," she mutters dramatically, "for having a normal life?" "Absolutely," you reply with a gentle shrug. She huffs, but she buys the jar anyway. That's the thing about the evening rush. Customers act outraged, pretend they're shocked at your prices, but they still buy everything because the sun is setting and dinner needs to be cooked now. 3 more customers arrive at once. One wants herbs, one wants a jar, one wants to ask questions without buying anything. You tackle them in order of who looks most likely to faint. "You have any mint left?" asks the herb customer. "A little," you say, pulling out a modest bundle. "Too small," he protests. "Then buy 2, you reply. He thinks about it. "Fine." Meanwhile, the jar customer leans closely, inspecting your handiwork as though he's considering adopting it. "Is this clay local?" "Yes." "From which bank of the Nile?" "The wet one." He narrows his eyes. You maintain your innocent smile. And the third person, the questioner, lifts a pot, turns it upside down, taps it, shakes it, squints at it, and then says, "I'll think about it." You want to scream, but you nod politely because you are a professional. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this section. Evening shopping was extremely common in ancient Egyptian markets. Temperatures became bearable, workers finished their daytime tasks, and families needed ingredients for supper, usually bread, vegetables, fish, beer, and sometimes meat if they were lucky. The result? Evening rush hour, ancient edition. Across the walkway, a spice seller is shouting louder than usual. The scent of roasted cumin and coriander sweeps through the air, making the whole lane smell like someone's preparing the best stew ever created. Customers swarm him. One woman shouts, "I need pepper!" He yells back, "Everyone needs pepper!" Someone else demands discount spice bundles. Someone else complains the previous batch was too aromatic, whatever that means. Someone else tells a story about how their cousin's goat fainted after sniffing paprika. The spice seller ignores all of them simultaneously like a master. Nearby, the bread seller is close to selling out. His baskets look emptier every minute, and each loaf he hands over is met with expressions of profound relief from hungry customers. Bread in the evening rush is basically treasure. The fruit seller, yes, the same one whose stall was raided by a goat earlier, is now guarding his remaining figs with the intensity of a military commander. He's swatting flies, customers, dust, and absolutely anything that enters his radius. Someone asks for a fig sample and he nearly screams. The crowd thickens. Children weave between legs. Dogs bark joyfully. A donkey tries to turn around in a space much too small and causes mild mayhem. Someone drops a fish. Someone else screams because they stepped on the fish. A third person asks if the fish is still edible. Historians will argue whether it was. You are busy, busier than at any other time today. A young couple approaches your stall next. They speak over each other in rapid-fire debating style. We should get 2 jars. 1 jar is enough. You always say that and then we run out. That was 1 time. You hold up 2 jars. Buy them both, you suggest gently. They pause, look at each other, look at you. Fine, they say in unison, as though admitting defeat. You bag the jars. They walk away bickering about who spends more money. You love evening customers. Another man jogs toward your stall sweating like he just outran a panther. Do you still have any time left? Yes. Thank the gods, he gasps dramatically. My wife will kill me if I come home without time. You decide not to ask questions. He buys the biggest bundle you have. A quirky tidbit occurs to you as you hand him the herbs. Some Egyptians believe that cooking with fresh herbs summoned the favour of household spirits, helping meals turn out better. But others thought herbs warded off minor demons that caused stomach aches. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were spiritual, medicinal, or excuses people used to buy more seasoning. As more customers swarm you, the energy intensifies. The sun dips lower, painting the marketplace gold, then orange, then a deep coppery red. Shadows lengthen. Conversations rise. The breeze cools. The mood isn't frantic anymore. It's vibrant, warm, alive. You can almost taste the flavours of the dinners people are preparing tonight. Stews rich with onions and herbs, fresh bread slathered with oil, roasted fish, maybe even dates and honey for those who can afford it. Behind you, a man shouts, "We're out of beer!" The entire market gasps like someone announced the apocalypse. You keep working, bagging goods, making change, answering questions, calming nerves, explaining prices, dodging elbows, and occasionally shouting above the noise. This is the peak, the crescendo, the marketplace at full power, and in the middle of it all you feel something quiet settling beneath your ribs. Satisfaction. This is exhausting. This is chaotic. This is noisy. But this is your world. The flow of people, the hum of voices, the rush of business. It makes the long, hot, dusty day feel worth it. The evening rush won't last forever, but while it's here, you ride it like a wave. The moment the evening rush finally loosens its grip, you feel it, an almost physical sigh settling across the marketplace. The noise dips, the frantic bargaining cools, and shoppers thin out until only a trickle remains. The sky overhead softens into a dreamy gradient of pinks and purples, shadows stretching long across the dusty ground. A few lingering customers wander the lanes lazily, touching goods they don't plan to buy, asking questions more out of curiosity than necessity. That's your signal. The day is winding down and it's time to pack up. You stretch your arms above your head, feeling every muscle complain like an elderly scribe writing too many receipts. The moment your joints pop, a nearby cat glares at you again, as though your spinal noises are ruining its carefully curated peace. You ignore it. You lean forward, bracing your palms on your knees, and let out one long, slow exhale. This is the part of the day that feels the heaviest. Not the heat, not the chaos, but the simple act of gathering everything back into some semblance of order. You kneel beside your jars, lifting each one carefully. The clay is still warm from the day, smooth beneath your fingertips. A thin film of dust coats everything. No surprise there. You brush it off gently. Sand is inevitable. Sand is eternal. Sand is basically your co-worker at this point. As you begin placing jars back into your basket, 2 late shoppers approach your stall, because of course they do. Evening customers are a unique species. They claim they don't want to disturb you while you're cleaning, and then proceed to disturb you while you're cleaning. "Are you still selling?" one asks politely. You smile with the haunted expression of someone who has been selling for 12 hours straight. "For you?" "Yes." She picks up a jar, turns it over as if expecting it to whisper its life story, and says, "I'll give you half the price." You blink slowly. "Half?" She nods earnestly. "It's late." "It is," you agree, "but my jars don't get cheaper with the sunset." Her companion elbows her. "Just buy it. You need it." She huffs, but she buys it. That's the last sale of the day, unless the gods curse you with one final surprise customer 10 minutes from now. You hope not. As soon as they leave, you begin the real work. You roll up your mat, shaking out dust, trapped herbs, and one aggressively confused beetle. You mutter a soft apology to the creature as it scurries away. Then you fold the mat into a neat bundle, tucking it under your arm. A mainstream historical fact drops into your mind. Egyptian market stalls were temporary structures, not permanent shops. People packed up everything each day, tables, mats, inventory, tools, and carried it home or stored it in nearby sheds. Setting up and taking down was as much a part of marketplace life as selling. You peel back your awning, folding the woven reeds carefully. They're fragile, always threatening to splinter at the worst moment. You tie it with a thin cord. As you stand, a gust of wind nearly makes your stack wobble. You whisper a warning to it. Not now. I've had enough wind for one lifetime. A vendor from the next stall over drags his wooden crate toward you. Long day, he says. Aren't they all? You reply. He laughs, wiping sweat from his forehead. At least no jars exploded today. You nod solemnly. Small victories. To your left, the beadmaker is scooping up the last few escaped beads rolling around her feet. She sighs loudly and says, I swear the wind hates me personally. The wind hates all of us equally, you say. She nods, comforted. As you gather your last few items, movement catches your eye. The fruit seller, poor man, stands with his hands on his hips, glaring at his fig baskets. They're much emptier now, partly from sales, and partly from goat-induced theft earlier in the day. You offer him a sympathetic look. He groans. I'm putting a fence around my stall tomorrow. You said that yesterday, you remind him. I meant it yesterday. Sure he did. You tuck your goods into your carrying basket, carefully balancing the jars so they won't clink too loudly on the walk home. You wrap herbs in leftover cloth strips, tying them gently. The scent of mint and thyme lingers on your fingers. A small reminder that this job, even with all its chaos, has its soothing moments. Then comes your quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians believed that the last item sold each day determined the next day's luck. If it was a good sale, prosperity followed. If it was a difficult customer, well, some vendors clean their stalls in a specific ritual pattern to cancel the bad energy. Historians still argue whether this was an official custom or simply a coping mechanism for exhausted merchants. You glance at your last customer, the half-price offer lady, and think, yeah, maybe I'll sweep in a special pattern. Tomorrow. Speaking of sweeping, you grab a small palm broom and clear the dust from your space. It's pointless, because the wind will just bring more dust tomorrow. But it's tradition, it's ritual, it marks closure for the day. Around you, the market slowly transforms. The loudest voices fade first. The clatter of tools, the rustle of cloth, the thump of crates follow. One by one, stalls fold inward like petals closing at dusk. The music of commerce becomes the calm rustle of people packing up and sharing tired jokes. The potter wipes his wheel. The spice seller ties shut his jars. The carpenter stacks tools into a leather bundle. A few remaining customers wander aimlessly, too indecisive to buy anything. Someone calls out, "Last chance for fresh fish." Someone else replies, "It's not fresh anymore." Laughter ripples through the market. Soft, weary, genuine. You lift your loaded basket carefully, adjusting it against your hip. It's heavy, but not unbearable. The weight tells you the day wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad either. Steady, respectable. Enough to fill your table tonight and keep you coming back tomorrow. As the twilight deepens and torches flicker on along the columns and walls, you look around at the slowly emptying square. This space that was loud, hot, ridiculous, dramatic, and alive just hours ago now settles into a soft, tired exhale. And so do you. It's time to go. With your basket secured against your hip and your mat tucked neatly under your arm, you begin drifting toward the quieter side of the marketplace, the side that only truly comes alive after the vendors pack up. The sun has nearly slipped beneath the horizon now, leaving behind a muted glow that paints the stalls in dusty gold and soft violet. Shadows stretch long across the ground, and a tired, contented hush settles over the rows of emptying booths. But the market isn't done. Not even close, because once the sellers retreat, a whole new cast of characters steps onto the stage. You move past a cluster of musicians setting up near the old sycamore trunk at the centre of the square. One tunes a lute, plucking strings that vibrate gently through the cooling air. Another tightens the head of a small hand drum, tapping it with the soft, careful precision of someone coaxing a heartbeat back into rhythm. They're preparing for the evening crowd, the workers who drift in seeking entertainment after a long day of labour, the families finishing errands, the youths who come here just to linger and flirt and laugh. The first musician strums a mellow chord. You feel the notes settle warmly between your ribs. Evening music always hits different, softer, more thoughtful, almost like the market is humming itself to sleep. You step aside as two sweepers wander past, older men with wiry arms and tired but steady movements. Each holds a bundle of palm branches tied into a broom. They sweep rhythmically, pushing debris into small piles, while muttering curses that are somehow both irritated and affectionate. "Too many onions today," one grumbles. "Too many people," the other replies. You smile. Sweepers are the unsung heroes of the market, showing up every evening to wage war against the day's chaos. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian cities relied heavily on these custodial workers, often hired by districts or guilds to keep communal spaces clean. Some records even mention their tools and wages, proof that even back then, nobody wanted to work in a dirty market at sunrise. As you continue walking, you notice kids playing by the potter's wheel, now idle and glistening with leftover clay. They poke at the soft remnants, giggling, shaping tiny animals with clumsy fingers. The potter pretends not to notice. He's busy chatting with a musician, but you see the small smile tugging the corner of his mouth. He'll clean their mess later, grumbling loudly and theatrically, but he doesn't mind. Next to them, the beadmaker sits with a small oil lamp, rethreading the last of her recovered beads. The warm orange glow plays across her face. "Long day," she says without looking up. "Aren't they all?" you reply. She nods, threading faster. Further down, a group of guards patrols lazily through the market. Their copper-tipped staffs gleam dully in the fading light. They aren't here to enforce strict law. They're mostly here to make sure nothing gets stolen overnight and that the occasional drunk doesn't fall asleep in someone's empty stall. One guard yawns loudly enough to startle a nearby cat. "Hard day?" you ask. He rubs his eyes. "Someone threw a turnip at my partner," you blink. "Was it during a fight?" "No, just randomly." You close your eyes for a second. Yes, that tracks. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some Egyptians believed the marketplace at night was patrolled not just by guards, but by wandering protective spirits. Benevolent ghosts who kept watch over valuables and chased away ill-intentioned thieves. Historians still argue whether this belief started as a religious idea or just clever fear-based marketing from nighttime watchmen. A loud metallic clank snaps your attention. The metalworker from earlier is still packing up, hammering shut the lid of the clay furnace he uses. Sparks flare briefly, dancing like fireflies before vanishing. His apprentice pumps the bellows one last time before shutting it down. Their movements are slowed by exhaustion now. The rhythm that was once lively is now a tired echo. Behind them, someone has opened a jug of beer, diluted, lukewarm, but beloved. A few workers gather around, sharing stories with the kind of laughter that only comes after a full, overwhelming day. Their jokes float through the cooling air, snippets of humour about troublesome customers, impossible haggles, and today's goose antics, which have apparently already become folklore. You walk past the fish stall, the same place where someone earlier debated whether a floorfish was still edible. The fish seller now sits leaning against the wall, one knee up, whistling softly as he cleans the last of his knives. He gives you a nod. "Sold well today?" you ask. He lifts a shoulder. "Good enough. Could have been better. Could have been worse." Then he adds, "At least no crocodiles near the river steps today." You laugh. "That's surprisingly reassuring," he grins. "Small victories." Down the row, the spice seller sits cross-legged near his remaining jars, shaking out his braided hair to rid it of lingering coriander dust. The scent still hangs faintly around him. Warm, bright, delicious. He hums as he cleans, stopping only when the goose strolls past his stall like it owns the place. Oh no, not again. But this time, the goose pays no attention to you. It appears to be conducting its own patrol of the closing market, inspecting fruit baskets and leftover crumbs. The fruit seller freezes as it approaches. "Not today," he whispers. The goose ignores him, thankfully. You continue past the bird, keeping a safe distance, and arrive at the centre of the square where the last flickers of sunlight glow behind the buildings. A group of storytellers begins taking their places, lean men with expressive hands and strong voices. They weave tales for the late shoppers and evening wanderers, stories of gods, pharaohs, monsters, and ancient battles. One recounts a tale of a fisherman who tricked a river spirit. Another tells a humorous story about a donkey who believed it was royalty. The crowd listens with wide eyes. You pause for a moment, letting a few words swirl around you, letting their cadence blend with the lute music, the fading chatter, the sweeping brooms. This is the marketplace's second life, a softer, quieter, dreamier version of the daytime chaos. As you turn toward the path leading home, you feel the atmosphere around you shift once more. Torches are being lit, lamps flicker, darkness gathers gently in corners. The marketplace is no longer a roaring beast, it's becoming a resting giant. And you? You're tired, sore, dusty, hungry again, but full of stories, moments, laughter, and the simple satisfaction of having lived another day in this ancient, noisy, beautiful world. You shift your basket one last time, feeling its weight settle comfortably against your hip. Then you head toward the dimming streets, ready to leave the marketplace behind, until tomorrow. You leave the marketplace slowly, not because you're reluctant, but because your feet have officially downgraded themselves to decorative. Every step feels like a soft negotiation between your muscles and the ground. The sky above has slipped fully into twilight now, deep purple at the edges, a soft gradient fading toward indigo overhead. The first stars blink into existence, shy at first, then bolder as the remaining daylight drains away. The city around you exhales. The heat retreats at last, replaced by a gentle coolness that drifts between the mud brick houses. You adjust the basket on your hip, feeling its familiar weight dig into your side, a comforting ache in its own way. Your mat is tucked under your arm, still dust-covered despite your best efforts. You'll shake it out at home, probably, maybe tomorrow. You step away from the bright heart of the marketplace and into the quieter arteries of the residential streets. Here, the noises soften. The occasional shout becomes a murmur. The persistent haggling becomes gentle conversation. The clatter of tools becomes the distant tapping of someone closing a wooden shutter. Small oil lamps glow in doorways, casting warm pools of light across the ground. Families gather around low tables, finishing meals. A child tugs at her mother's sleeve, eager to show off a bead she found earlier. A bead you suspect escaped from the beadmaker's tray during the sandstorm. You smile faintly at the thought. Someone nearby is grinding grain with a stone quern, the rhythmic scrape cutting steadily through the evening air. The sound is strangely calming, almost meditative. You let it guide your pace. A dog trots past, tail wagging, carrying something unidentifiable in its mouth. You decide not to investigate. Behind you, the marketplace musicians strike up a final gentle tune that floats through the streets like a lullaby for the whole district. You turn down a narrower alley, cooler here and darker. The walls on either side glow faintly from the reflected firelight. A woman sits outside her doorway weaving a small mat. She nods as you pass. A pair of young boys chase each other with sticks, laughing breathlessly, their shadows flickering wildly against the walls. You breathe deeply. The day's dust settles on your tongue. Your clothes cling to you with the last threads of heat. You can still smell the spices from the market, cumin, cinnamon, coriander, woven stubbornly into your hair. And beneath all that, the faint scent of the river drifting through the city like a whispered promise. You cross a small courtyard where a potter's apprentice is washing clay off his hands. He looks exhausted, slumped over his basin, eyes half closed. When he notices you, he attempts a wave, but mostly just flops his hand in your direction. "Long day?" you ask. He groans. "Tomorrow will be longer," you grin. "Then sleep fast." He snorts a laugh. "You too." You move on, your footsteps echoing softly as the city transitions into its nighttime rhythm. Crickets begin chirping. Somewhere a donkey brays mournfully, as though recalling a deep personal disappointment. The goose, mercifully, is nowhere to be seen. At the corner near your home, a small group of neighbours sits sharing a clay lamp and trading stories about the day. They gesture animatedly, pointing back toward the marketplace. You can make out fragments, and then the monkey stole the headcloth. The wind nearly took my mat. Someone tried to buy figs with a broken pot. You smile because even after the dust, the heat, the chaos, this is what remains. The stories. The ones that make the exhaustion worthwhile. You reach your doorway. A small clay lamp burns beside it, casting a gentle glow over the threshold. You shift your basket to the ground with a relieved grunt and stretch your back until it pops like a reed snapping in half. Inside, the air is cooler, quieter, familiar. You set your things down carefully, jars aligned, herbs placed on the shelf, mat tucked into the corner. You wash your hands in a small basin, watching the day's dust swirl away in delicate spirals. Then you sit, just sit, letting the silence fill the space where noise lived all day, letting your pulse settle, letting your mind wander through the memories of the marketplace, its colours, its scents, its arguments, its laughter. You think of the craftspeople shaping their goods. You think of the foreign merchants with their gleaming textiles. You think of the sacred offering traders with their incense clouds. You think of the inspectors, the gossips, the auctioneer, the musical chaos, the windstorms, the evening rush. You think reluctantly of the goose, and then you think of tomorrow, because as exhausting as today was, you know you'll be back. The marketplace calls you, anchors you, shapes you. It's messy and loud and unpredictable, but it's also alive, and you're part of its rhythm. You close your eyes, and you let the city drift towards sleep. And now, as the last traces of the marketplace fade from your senses, let everything inside you begin to soften. Imagine the streets around you growing quieter, the footsteps fading one by one, leaving only the gentle whisper of the night air brushing softly past the walls. Let the colours dim until they blur into dusky blues and muted violet shadows. Let the scents of herbs and incense dissolve into something faint, comforting, familiar. Feel the weight of the day loosening its grip on your shoulders. Every muscle unwinds just a little more, the tension melting away like warm clay washed in cool water. The noise of the marketplace becomes a distant memory, echoes softened by time, smoothed into a gentle hum that fades into silence. Even the animals settle now, the donkeys resting in their warm stalls, the cats curled in small circles against quiet doorways, even the troublesome goose finally finding a place to sleep far from your path. The city exhales, and you exhale with it, long and slow. Imagine your home quiet around you, the soft flicker of a clay lamp, the cool floor beneath your feet, the hush of stillness settling into every corner. The basket is set aside, the mat is rolled, the jars are safe, your work is done, the day is complete, and now there is nothing left for you to do but breathe. Take your time. Let the calm stretch out like the wide curve of the river under moonlight. Let your thoughts drift softly, like small boats carried downstream without effort. Let your mind lighten, your body settle, your breath slow to a peaceful rhythm. You've earned your rest. You're safe. You're home. You're done for today. Sleep comes gently now, wrapping around you like cool linen in the night.